A technical piece in the morning to talk about some of the city's plans and programs, and after lunch we wanted to have something to show stakeholders what they can do to get to zero waste at home, fashion being one of those options.
I am happy to see that the zero waste concept is finding its way in so many different industries, including the fashion industry. Fashion, and fashionable fashion, not just fashion, but fashionable fashion.
In addition to the city departments who are here today, we also have groups like Trash for Teaching, groups like New Waste Business Recycling that can offer information to stakeholders for ways that they can go more zero waste at home.
Trash for Teaching is a non-profit teaching organization. We take manufactured cast-offs from local Southern California manufacturers and use them as a teaching component within schools. And we go in for 6 weeks and teach children about recycling. So we've taken all of our manufactured cast-offs and we've developed a manipulative toy where 99% of the toy, including the packaging, can be used to make 3 different characters. It incorporates things from box manufacture, Pentel pen parts, and tubes from the clothing industry. But our strongest mission is to reuse what's out there before it goes to a landfill.
Today I'm a vendor at the Zero Waste Conference, and our products are made of corn, sugarcane, and bamboo. They are compostable in nature, where they will go back into the earth. This is a sugarcane plate, obviously made of sugarcane, and you can substitute this out for the ones made of paper. And again, we are not cutting down trees to make these products. These items are made of corn. They're corn-based. These will substitute for the plastic. We always talk about one step at a time. If you have 1 million people doing one small thing, you're better off.
Okay, the Zero Waste Plan was really the Bureau of Sanitation's idea to get the community members engaged in beneficially reducing, reusing, and recycling. The city needs to reach 70% of waste that is not going to landfilling by 2013, and the council has adopted a goal of zero waste by 2025. Okay, the Zero Waste Plan started in the spring of 2007. We reached out to neighborhood councils, community groups, church groups, environmental groups, and the trash industry. So some of the ideas that came out of the initial community engagement process in the first year was education. A lot of people within the city aren't even aware of just all the wonderful, fantastic recycling programs that the Bureau of Sanitation offers. So they said, you need to spread the word out there, because people just don't know, they're not aware. Another thing was that they wanted the city to take a leadership role in exemplifying zero waste. So when they go to City Hall or when they go to a public park, they wanted to see blue recycle bins next to every trash can. Some of the city recycling programs that we have currently we have our SAFE centers, which stands for solvents, flammables, automotives, and electronics. And you can take all your hazardous waste, like your batteries, your compact fluorescent light bulbs, used oil. We have a blue bin recycling program for both our residential households as well as our multifamily, and right now we can recycle all plastic, all clean, extended polystyrene, which is also known as styrofoam. You can put your metal and plastic coat hangers in there, any glass and plastic bottles. We also have a voluntary restaurant food scrap recycling program. Organics and food scraps actually account for 35 to 40% of what ends up in our black bin right now.
We have a series of policies that are being recommended. One of them being, for example, do we do mandatory recycling here in Los Angeles? Do we then have more manufacturer responsibility? That is, that anybody who manufactures and sells products in Los Angeles needs to have them certified as recyclable. These are ideas and proposed policies, not yet adopted. Ultimately, the adoption is done by the council and the mayor.
Well, I actually did put the conference together. I did help to organize the fashion show also, and I was a model in the show, and I wanted to be a part of it just because I really felt that getting the zero waste message across is important. What I'm wearing right now is completely made out of trash. Used up elastic that was thrown away, crocheted Nordstrom bags. It's all pop tops on my headpiece. It's all done from trash. And they have literally gone through dumpsters, collected things from trash cans. Here's a suit that's made out of various alcoholic beverage things. We've got plastic six-pack ring, corks, and beer bottle caps. I recently designed an outfit called Catch a Wave, and it was it's shaped like ocean waves and looks like the ocean, and it basically addresses the issues of the health of our ocean, which is really in pretty sad state right now. There's a garbage patch that is said to be the size of Texas, which is floating about 1,000 miles off the coast of California. The wind currents collect it there, and it's just this huge mass of garbage that fish are getting into and eating, and it's a disaster. Another one of our goals is just get people to quit using plastic altogether, because most of that garbage patch is about 80% plastic. So the dress basically just symbolizes the health of our oceans and the need for us to think about that and do something about it.
The inserts here are made of lime bags that come from Trader Joe's. They put their limes in these bags, and the spools are all polyester thread spools.
It's important for young people to be involved because the world depends on us. If we don't take the change, if we don't take the steps to make that change, we're just going to end up all like we are now and worse.
Our vision for Los Angeles in 20 years is that we have reached that theoretical zero waste, that nothing gets wasted. We want recycling to be a form of life. That's our vision.
Time now for a short break, and when we come back, we'll show you how to go green the next time you go grocery shopping. Stay right there. And welcome back to CityWorks, the program that shows you, the citizens of Los Angeles, how our Department of Public Works is working for you. Now, one way all of us can help to reduce our city's waste stream is to go green at the grocery store. All you have to do is exchange the paper and plastic bags you normally use for those reusable ones. Let's visit a South Los Angeles supermarket and see how easy it is.
They're recyclable bags. What you see here are city staff, and they're giving away reusable bags to use in your grocery shopping or other everyday shopping. This is an ongoing effort to get people to move away from single-use plastic and paper bags. The Bureau of Sanitation, the Department of Public Works is heavily involved in this. We do this throughout the year. We have many partners. We work with Heal the Bay, the County of Los Angeles, the State of California.
I think it's a good thing. Personally, I've been recycling for years, and it's always been something that's, good for the environment, is good for us.
Well, I have my recycled bags. I'm getting ready to go into the store and do some shopping.
To be very honest, I think I've used a recyclable bag one time.
Would you like a free bag, sir?
Thank you.
Thank you. You have a good day. The city's been interested in examining what it can do to reduce the waste of plastic bags. What we call a single-use bag is a thin plastic or a paper bag that is only for carrying materials from one place to the other. They're not made to be reusable, they're not durable, and many times they do become litter. We focus on plastic bags because of their use in the city of Los Angeles. Over 2 billion plastic bags are used every year, and about 95% of them still go to a landfill despite all of the recycling that we try to do. The state of California enacted legislation, AB 2449, that created a system where all these large grocery stores would have to recycle plastic bags. But at the same time, part of that legislation prohibits the city of Los Angeles from enacting its own per bag fee. In July 2008, the City Council adopted a series of measures. One of them was to ban the use of plastic bags in 2010 if a statewide fee on plastic bags is not enacted. The city can ban the use of single-use bags, but we cannot place a per bag fee on plastic bags at this time.
When I look around my neighborhood sometimes, it's kind of sad to see all these plastic bags, a lot of plastic bags floating around in people's yards. Sometimes they get in my yard, a lot of times actually.
Well, the Bureau of Sanitation has two reasons why it's very important for us. We manage the solid waste that's generated in the city, both waste and recycling, and we want to see the amount of material that goes into landfill reduced. And we also have our Watershed Protection Division, and they're charged with making sure that litter doesn't enter the waterways and flow to the ocean to affect the wildlife. So in that way we have a two-prong effort. Plastic bags are very bad for the environment overall. They blow around, get stuck in trees, as I'm sure everyone has seen when they're driving around. They go into the waterways, into our storm drains, and they're carried out into the ocean. They choke wildlife, they pollute the water. They do not break down under natural conditions, so they're there in the environment for hundreds of years. While a paper bag or a compostable bag may break down within a certain amount of time, plastic bags will always be there.
I'm going to teach my daughter Messiah how to recycle because it's very important. It helps save the planet, and I want her to always consider every life.
I'm with the Ad Hoc River Committee, and one of our goals is to really establish a healthy river in the city of Los Angeles. There's a lot of plastic in the river right now, and our goal is to try to remove as much as possible. For several years we worked on that, and we funded this young group of people called the River Keepers, and from Monday to Friday they come in and clean the river every day, removing plastic, polystyrene, trash. We actually find in many places along the river that we have sort of a Grand Canyon effect. We have decades of plastic mixed in with sediment, mixed in with other like carpets and other trash. So it is a very hard thing to realize that when you look at a natural bottom of the river, it's not really natural. It has a lot of plastic. We could do a lot of things to help the environment, and one of the most important things to do is to use a reusable bag. Everybody using a reusable bag is going to reduce the need to clean the river, and it would also improve our environment and keep more plastic bags out of the ocean, the river and ocean.
I'm practicing. My daughter's on me to get green.
I think the word is getting out about single-use bags. I think that I've seen many more of our partners, such as the grocery stores, Ralph's, Food for Less, some of our other partners have been giving away their own reusable bags or selling them at a very low price and creating that incentive. People can bring in their reusable bags, and they'll take a nickel for every reusable bag you bring in off of your grocery bill. So I think that is starting to change people's habits and change people's awareness. I don't think it'll be easy to change people's habits, because that's really what we're asking people to do. Folks have been used to using the single-use plastic and paper bags since the 1950s. So getting them to change their ways and to do things a little bit differently, we're in it for the long haul. We know that it's going to be an incremental change and that it's going to take many years.
My oldest daughter, she has started buying reusable bags for herself. She has like 5 now. And my 2-year-old has a little one, a green one. So we're kind of like getting into it. I just have one other family member to convert over.
We'll pick up a few things, a couple canned goods, maybe a few frozen dinners for tonight, and basically go home and store it away and put the bags in sight so I remember for next time. Maybe hang them on the front door or something so I remember to walk out with them.
There's many benefits to shoppers. Number one, the reusable bags are much more durable. You can put a lot more stuff in them, and they help clean up the environment. If you think about the number of people in Los Angeles, there's 4 million. People go to the grocery store at least once a week. If we could get folks to use reusable bags every time they go to a grocery store, that's over 1 billion bags that would not be used. And that would be less litter on the streets, less litter in the water, and less damage to our ecosystems. It's important to let people know that it's the small things that they do that can make the big difference. If they just change one habit and they use a reusable bag, or they change a habit of buying something when they don't really need it, that's going to help the environment for everybody.
Now, Los Angeles city officials point out that in countries like Ireland, for example, where reusable bags are promoted and single bag use fees are charged, plastic bag use has dropped by 90%. Well, that's our show for today. I hope you've enjoyed learning about a few of the many services and programs of the Los Angeles City Department of Public Works. I'm Phil Schuman. And for the many hardworking and dedicated people who make up the department, out there working for all of us each and every day, making sure that our city works, we say thanks.
Bulky item pickup? Call 311, the toll-free number for non-emergency services. 311, your one call to City Hall. Graffiti removal? Call 311, the toll-free number for non-emergency services. 311, your one call to City Hall.
LA City View Channel 35. Your city, your channel.
Meeting for Thursday, the 11th of February, 2010. This is a meeting of the Los Angeles City Council, continuing an adjourned regular meeting from yesterday and a special meeting, as well in our continuing deliberations on the LA City budget. This is, I think, our first Thursday meeting that we've had in many years, if not decades. I want to thank the council members who are here on time. We do have a quorum. I want to thank those members of the public that are here. We are available online at lacity.org, through our city's website at LA City Channel 35, and also through your telephone at 213-621-CITY. Our agendas are also available online, and our cards are available in the back. For anybody who wishes to be heard today, I want to thank all the members that are here. Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Han, Weezer, Koretz, Krikorian, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Wesson-Sign, Garcetti. 11 members present, Mr. President, and you have a quorum to resume the regular meeting.
Okay. Mr. City Attorney's public comment cards, would that be for yesterday's meeting, or is those for the special meeting today? How would we handle those cards if we wanted to go to public?
If you want to handle them for this meeting, you would have to reopen public comment from yesterday.
I think we'll do it that way as a courtesy to the folks that are here. I'll move to reopen public comment from the meeting that we have had public comment on already without objection. I'd like to ask Mike O'Gara to come forward as our first speaker. And I have a card here with no name on it. If there's somebody who wants to follow him, just come up and tell me what the name is. I'll put the name in. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, honorable members of the City Council. My name is Mike O'Gara. I've lived in Sun Valley for 36 years. Yesterday I arrived here too late to put in a speaker's card for yesterday's item number 16. The item was not labeled special and I was not able to speak about it. Today I've come to ask you that you reconsider that item. You didn't have enough information to vote for it. I request you send the motion to the City Attorney so he can read the ordinance number 176535 in order to make a ruling as to whether the use of the monies in the Bradley Landfill Community Trust Fund can legally be used for the treatment of diabetes. I believe he will rule that it's not a justified use of the money. It's certainly a worthwhile objective to try to treat diabetes, but it cannot and should not be done from this fund. The ordinance reads that the fund shall be used to pay for experts to conduct health studies and to educate the community on the impact of the Bradley landfill on the nearby residents and to pay for projects to mitigate environmental impacts from the Bradley landfill that are not already required by existing law and regulations. Paragraph 6 of the agenda item you voted on yesterday does not contain all of the language that the ordinance has. If this request was for a respiratory ailment, it might fit the description, but the treatment of diabetes cannot be construed in any way as being an impact to the Bradley landfill or a project to mitigate environmental impacts from the Bradley landfill. Diabetes is not a result of any environmental impact that I know of, and neither is it an impact of the Bradley landfill. The language in the ordinance is specific and cannot be interpreted as allowing this expenditure of funds. Please table this or reconsider it, and let's have the City Attorney review the language in that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming back. We had a blank. Is this yours, sir? We just restate your name for the public record?
Wayne Spindler.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to comment about something. Apparently the council is going to try to create a per barrel tax on extracting all barrels of crude oil in the city of Los Angeles. Why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense to do that, because it's been reported that when crude oil is piped through pipes under a given council district, that half of that money has been given to some sort of a slush fund within the council district where the pipe is running. There's $40 million of money that apparently is non-discretionary or otherwise known as off the books. How do you take $40 million of money and put it off the books? I mean, what does that mean? I mean, you're spending the money, $2 million per council district, well, that's $30 million. An additional $10 million is for the one half of the sale of property within a given council district and the pipelines running underneath certain city districts. So that's $40 million. So when are we going to have an audit of each of the 15 council districts showing where that $40 million went last year? and the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that, because in 5 years, you're talking about $200 million. So where is this money going to? That's a good thing. So if it's off the books, then by definition, you have to determine whether or not that money is considered to be a constructive dividend of each council member. If that money is a constructive dividend, then it's actually personable income for each of the council members, and it would actually be taxable income. So if it's not, then it has to be public funds, and it has to be fully accounted for. No on this barrel tax. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Some of those items will be discussed today. By the way, there's nothing off the books. Those are all public documents, and will be. They have been every year. The property sales, for instance, the last few years have gone 100% back to the general fund. That was a policy we passed here temporarily. We're looking at making that permanent as well. So we'll be discussing those, and we appreciate your comments very much. Those are the only public comment cards. Anybody else on public comment? Okay. We have then the agenda. Just to clarify one thing for the city clerk on item. Let's see, the main item we had yesterday, I think there was some, as we had the amendments, when we took up 14.
Yes.
We moved the amendments that were stated publicly and had a second as well. So we want to, I know a number of those were oral as well as a couple that were written. So just for the record, we adopted as amended. And I know that reflects in the report that we have here, but we just wanted to make sure that was clarified because some people asked if we actually did adopt their seconds, but we didn't have individual votes. We just accepted them as friendly amendments and then took a vote on item 14. So wanted to state that for the record. Next we have, I think, a couple items that we've continued that are before us, colleagues. Those items that we have carried over from the previous day. First, item number 18. If I can ask the CAO to come forward on item number 18. Colleagues, the game plan for today, just a quick heads up for everybody so everybody knows what we're going to be discussing today. And the goal is to have this meeting run till 1 o'clock or before, but no later than 1 o'clock for today, if we can get this all done, is after we've taken up the public comment, which we did, we want to take up the items that were carried over from yesterday, specifically item number 18, which deals with coalition concessions and transfers. So the CAO, personnel, and lacers, actually, if they can come forward as well, are going to come forward to discuss that. And if we need to, since some of these are ongoing discussions, we'll just continue that item here so we can get those updates on transfers and savings. We'll take up, I think, item number 21. There's no action necessary. And 22 we can receive and file. If there's no objection to doing that, let's receive and file 22. And 21 requires no action. Those are the ones that were carried on. Then we'll call the special meeting to order at 11:15. And then we'll begin the discussion on some of the other partnership, in some cases public-private partnership, some cases public-public partnership ideas. Items 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are on street sweeping, El Pueblo, multifamily refuse collection, and golf concessions and golf courses. And then we'll use the bulk of the remaining 2 hours to discuss those items to see what sort of studies, report backs, or actions we need on those. So anything else that anybody else would like to bring up from the agenda today? Otherwise, I think that'll be the game plan moving forward. So Mr. Parks, if you wanted to queue up on item number 18, I know that a number of different members have asked what savings we actually have had and we've generated from, are we on track with the coalition savings that were supposed to be generated? Are we on track in terms of the transfers, whether those transfers available? But maybe you can frame a little bit of that and then we'll hear from the CAO personnel and lacers on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, colleagues, I think that it's important that we have this discussion at this time because we hear so many rumors and so many numbers that come up as to whether departments can absorb, whether there's a number of positions, whether people are being moved through the system fast enough, whether we can absorb more than 22 to 2,400 early retirements. And I think it's important to go through that agreement and list those concessions that were given so it's a clear update picture. And I think we should, in asking the chair, the president of the commission, the council, that we do this fairly routinely because we all get taken askew on our mission each day because someone starts a rumor about something that didn't occur, and by the time we've nailed it down within another day or so, we've lost a lot of time and energy. So, Miguel, if you could walk through that coalition agreement and give us as update information as possible, the numbers, what we've achieved, what we expect to achieve, so that there's no doubt as to what the circumstances as we know today.
Certainly. Good morning. Miguel Santana, City Administrative Officer. If you recall, in the fall when the coalition agreement was approved, there were various elements to it. And one of those pieces included $80 million, close to $80 million, about $77.8 million worth of concessions that the coalition members were making as a way of addressing this year's deficit. As I reported last week and earlier this week, those concessions, coupled with the concessions that we were able to generate with the PPL, with other bargaining units, as well as the furloughs that EAA has undergone and the furloughs among the non-represented classes, have essentially generated enough savings to reduce the deficit that we started with from $400 million down to about $22 million. The problem we're facing this fiscal year is not an expenditure problem, and that is entirely due to the concessions that our various bargaining units have contributed to reduce this year's deficit. Unfortunately, the problem we're facing is now on the revenue side for this fiscal year, and as I reported, we're experiencing a $185 million drop in revenue. But to be specific, on the coalition agreement, we are expected to be on track in being able to generate the $77.8 million, approximately so, at the end of this fiscal year. The areas included increased compensated time off bank to 240 hours, the defer of ERIP pay, the cash buyout for those members of ERIP who are participating, the deferment of the 2010 excess sick leave payout to next year, a change in the work schedule to 76.5 hours of work for 17 pay periods, the elimination of bonus compounding, 72-hour voluntary alternative work schedule, the defrail elimination, the utilization of ERIP COLA deferral savings, and the deferment of 2010 bar dues to August 2010. So when combined, all of these various concessions should meet the target that we've established for this fiscal year. Many of these, if not most of them, are one-time savings. The deferments, for the most part, need to be paid back next year, and so we have included that in next year's projected budget.
One of the things that's gotten a lot of attention on the number of openings or transfers. There was numbers all the way from maybe 1,000 down to 360, and if I understand the process, as of March, all of the general fund positions should be through ERIP. Then they'll start the special funds and the proprietary departments. With the expectation of 1,000 layoffs, where do they fit in trying to go into those proprietaries and also special funds?
Sure. It's my understanding from the personnel department that since March of last year, there was about 300 or so folks who transferred from general fund positions to special fund positions. In the last several weeks and with even higher intensity in the last several days, there's been a real aggressive effort by the department to work with all of the general managers to identify as many vacant special fund and proprietary positions throughout the city. At this point in time, I believe that 376 positions have been identified in all of the proprietaries and all the special funds. These do not include positions that may exist within a department, and we've seen, for example, in the city attorney's office, where they've identified approximately 35 positions that are paid for by by special funds or proprietary, where they're simply moving people within their own office from one source of revenue to another source of revenue. Those are not included in the overall number. We're talking about positions that could be made available to folks from one department to another department. There was an aggressive effort put in place in the last several days, which called for anyone who's interested in volunteering to be moved to a special funded or proprietary position to fill an online application. I understand that about 1,800 applications were submitted. The departments are currently reviewing those applications and are expected to, by the end of this week, identify those individuals that they anticipate moving to those special funds. And the departments have been directed by the mayor to move as aggressively as possible to have those positions transferred to those new assignments. Once we complete the ERIP process, and as you indicated, we will be done with all general fund positions by March, which was the target that we had established, there will be openings targeted in special fund and proprietaries that will be rolling out the rest of the fiscal year. We don't know exactly what number of those positions will be filled by the proprietaries and the special fund, in part because those departments, many of them are facing their own fiscal problems. We've understood from both the harbor and the airport that one of the ways they're addressing the fiscal issues within their own departments is that they have planned not to fill all of the vacant ERIP positions. We haven't received an exact number of how many they actually will fill, and we'll know that later through the year. And certainly once we do, we will be working as aggressive as we have been the last 2 days to have those filled by general fund positions. Again, the recession that is obviously impacted the general fund is also impacting the airports and the harbors. The harbor is essentially the mouth of goods that come from Asia, and there's been a significant decline in the number of cargo that has entered the harbor, and certainly the airport has also been impacted by the recession. But I recommend, if you have any more specific questions on the intention behind the general managers in those specific departments, that we ask that they come and speak directly on those matters. And certainly we could have LACERS and the personnel department provide any additional information.
I'd like to clarify for the record, Tom Maldus, Assistant General Manager of LACERS. After the March ERIP retirements, there are approximately 115 more general funded positions that will be retired in April. And that will pretty much take care of all the general funded retirements through the ERIP process.
There's 115 beyond March?
Correct.
Okay. And then let me ask one thing that has come up recently, and maybe Ms. Lyons or Miguel, you can comment on this. If whatever the number is on the transfers, do the city employees, are they impacted by their tenure or their seniority? And I would assume, going to Ward and Power, they would have some impact on their pension. Have those issues been explored, so that one of the concerns is that if they make these moves and Ward and Power, airports, or harbor looks at their own books and cannot continue their payroll as they're absorbing these people, does it put them in jeopardy as being the low person on the seniority poll to be again in a position for layoffs or other transfers?
Transfers do impact an individual's seniority. There are two types of seniority that must be calculated in layoffs. One, which is the initial layoff, when a department calls for a cut in clerk typists, for example, in that department. Then we use what we call layoff seniority, which is all of their time in that class, citywide, and higher classes. So in the transfer, in a layoff in that department, the first before the bumping starts, it would not, because they would bring that seniority in that class and higher classes with them. However, it gets more complex when the displacement begins. So if a senior clerk typist displaces to water and power as an example, and now we're looking at displacing senior clerk typists, then eventually clerk typists, the seniority that the individual has is only their seniority in that class, in that department.
Sure.
So if they just got there, once displacements begin, they're disadvantaged.
Okay, so the transfers are not a guarantee that it's a permanent assignment then?
It is not a guarantee, and in the notification that we sent to over 4,000 city employees, we made that clear. We thought that was only fair.
Okay. And Miguel, you mentioned about the proprietary departments. They have not come to grips with when they may be making the decisions on their budget as to how many people they can accept or absorb in the transfers?
Well, they haven't shared that with us yet specifically, and certainly we'll be working with them with the personnel department, once they've established that number, to try to transfer as many people as possible. I don't know if there's anyone here from the proprietary that could answer that.
Let me ask, Mr. President, could we add one of our future council days, the proprietary general managers to come in to talk on this issue of when they can give us an idea on their budget and how many people they can absorb and what they're going to do with the positions that they ERIP? Are they going to fill them all so that we can get a on-the-ground discussion as to what they intend to do during the fiscal year?
Yes, we'll work with those managers to see if there's a day next week which we can bring, and I know Ms. Hahn has brought this up too, but we can bring the director of the port, the airport, and DWP here for them to report on what those ERIP openings may present.
And let me ask one other thing. Would any of the transfers impact CRA? Or are they in the position to absorb?
Give you another answer. Are any of these?
No, this is not. None of these are CRA.
I mean, would they be in a position to absorb any of these positions?
We were recently briefed a few weeks ago that they're anticipating shortfalls within their own budgets. They actually have asked us to consider an early retirement program within the CRA. And so that's an indication. That was one of their strategy as a way of addressing the particular shortfall that they're facing.
Okay. And then, Miguel, just my final question. Any other loose ends that we have been brought to our attention as to concerns about the full implementation of the concessions that we've not covered so far?
The only issue that I think is still a loose end, and maybe one worth asking the proprietaries when they come here, there's been concern that as it relates to the change in the work hour schedule for coalition members, that hasn't been fully implemented in the proprietaries. And so we have reminded the proprietaries on several occasions of what the agreement is. They're not exempt because the members that exist within the proprietaries are coalition members, and it's by virtue of being a proprietary doesn't exempt you from the agreement itself. That's the only sort of loose end that exists.
Just remind us what that work hours is. It's shortening the shift.
Right. It's the workday, reducing the paid workday to 76.5 hours versus 80 hours every pay period. And that's the only. I mean, we've heard it anecdotally from members of the coalition that hasn't been fully implemented. And again, we've, to the extent within our authority, to remind the proprietary that they have a responsibility to complete that, fulfill that obligation.
And just so we're clear, the understanding that they fulfill that commitment of shortening the workday, that opens up more hours or positions for transfer?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it obviously doesn't help the general fund because these are all special fund positions. It may create an opportunity for a temporary transfer, but keep in mind this is only that portion of the agreement only applies this year, and so next year they go back to a full 80 hours, so whatever savings they would have generated goes away, and they would be, if they were to sort of cobble together the hours, they would now have a position that they can't afford to fill.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Alarcon is our next speaker.
We just have a number of details. When we furlough a class and some of the members of the class are funded by grants, are we still requiring them to be furloughed? And to anticipate your answer, but to get to the next question, do we not jeopardize grants if we do not give them the 80 hours that we promised?
You raise a good point. I think that when furloughs were first introduced to the city, I think even before I arrived, there was some indication that equity was an important value that the city had as it relates to its employees. And so there was an attempt to apply whatever furloughs were going to be done consistently across the board. The outcome of that has been that in those positions that are funded by special funds or grant funds, as you point out, that we're basically, in some cases, shooting ourselves in the foot. We're reducing our ability to maximize those grant dollars. And so as we move forward for the next few years, and certainly our fiscal situation is not going to be one that's going to be improved, if we pursue furloughs as one of the strategies to mitigate our deficit, we will be recommending a change in that policy.
So we should try to exempt employees that are fully funded through outside sources.
I think we should seriously consider that. I mean, weigh that, the loss of that revenue with the fact that
that would also entice people to want to transfer into those positions. But also, with regard to the transfers, it would seem to me that the people with seniority would have the first choice to move, and I would believe that to be the case, but I would also think that the general managers of the proprietaries and whoever controlled the special funds might not work with us on that. And in other words, we want to maximize the dollars that we are reducing as part of the program here. So if somebody with tenure and seniority were to want to transfer, they should be given priority over somebody who makes less money. They may be in the same class, they may be equally qualified, or even in the general manager's opinion, more qualified, but within the context of the civil service rules, we are in a special condition, and we should urge those general managers to maximize our dollars. Are we finding that situation?
Most individuals who are in the same civil service class would be at a higher step, and so the salaries would be pretty much the same across the board if you have 20 years or if you have 5 years in a particular
Before you go
class.
there, am I assuming that if somebody has seniority, they get first choice on the transfer?
No, you cannot assume that. I don't assume that.
If 3 employees with different levels of seniority in the same classification from the same department want to transfer into a special fund, or let's say a proprietary department, doesn't the one with seniority have a little more?
What was done in this expedited process is we notified everyone in the class group in some instances where there was a targeting in the department of the opportunity. And many people disagreed with that. They thought we should only notify the people with the least amount of seniority who were going to be cut, but we didn't think that was appropriate. Because, as you say, individuals who have more seniority should have that opportunity if they would like to. So those individuals were made aware of the opportunity to transfer to a proprietary, and they sent their application to them. Now, if they have more experience and knowledge and certifications, hopefully they would be the ones selected.
Well, I just want to make the point that we should. I just want to make the final point that what we really want to do is encourage the general managers to help us on this side.
Yes.
By taking the employee that's going to, assuming they have meet the minimum qualifications or the relatively equal, that they take the employee that is going to alleviate our burden to the greatest extent. I just, if we should we formalize that policy, or?
I think the question becomes, we've identified 1,000 positions, and we had 1,800 people apply. So obviously there are folks who believe, even though they weren't on an identified position for elimination, who believe that perhaps their position is at risk for future layoffs or future position reductions. So the way it was established, partly because of our required way, is that we made it open to everybody. So it's no different than just a regular transfer that occurs all the time. This created an opportunity for folks to move into. Now, obviously, the competition is fairly fierce. If there's only 365 positions and now 1,800 people who've applied, the general managers who are in a position to select an individual have a pretty broad net to pick from. And it's going to become harder and harder as we proceed forward, because obviously the number of positions are going to become less available.
Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. And colleagues, I've been seeing how we've been moving in this direction that allows us to speak in generalities. We've been casting broad definitions and moving in a manner that allows us to start meeting these deadlines. But I also think there's another opportunity where, as chairpersons of respective committees, we could start challenging our directors and managers to allow for a much more specific and clear dialogue as to how we start addressing these positions. For example, in the planning, there are certain positions that are revenue generating. Some of them have immediate impact in terms of revenue base for the city. There's also other positions like community planners that will start defining how revenue can be generated in the future by stimulating development scenarios, opportunities for investment, and improving our respective communities. But those positions don't seem to be as high in priority because of the lack of its immediacy, its ability to generate revenue. So we have a short-term need, but we also have a long-term perspective we should keep our eye on. But that dialogue could happen in our respective committees. We could be having special sessions that allows each committee chair to allow for the general manager to promote, suggest strategies that speak to how we start saving positions, how we move skill sets, so that we do not cripple the city because of these massive movements that have an indirect cost to us in the long run. So I don't want to put that in the form of a motion, but I think in this discussion, perhaps we can get a report back from the CAO and how that could be structured. Perhaps we can have, we can get a directive from the President of the Council. I humbly advise if the committee chairs can come forth with a proposal and what they see is direly needed for those departments. Hopefully have that dialogue so that the front line can have an environment and a scenario that they can speak to. We have a little bit of time to do that. We've given ourselves a couple of weeks. If we're going to be working as hard as we are, these meetings and every minute is a very precious period for identifying those positions. And I would just like to open that up. Whether it falls on deaf ears, I don't know. If we feel comfortable doing that as committee chairpersons, but there is a role for us to fulfill, and we could augment the substance of this conversation and come up with much specific results by identifying these positions that are revenue generating, immediate, but also positions that allow us to begin to pick ourselves up out of this hole. And that would be my humble suggestion to this body.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. I'm on the queue after Ms. Hahn, so I'll address that, and I appreciate that very much and agree with it. Ms. Hahn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to go back to your initial comments about the harbor and why, again, there seems to be not a good number of positions that they're willing to. Can you reiterate what you said about their revenues? We're not holding time, are we? Are we holding time today? No? We're not ever doing that again as long as we live? Okay.
Well, currently the harbor has identified 35 positions.
Oh, 35?
Yes.
Oh.
So they're moving in the right direction.
See, I mean, that's good, but, you know, that bothered me a little bit, which is kind of what I was talking to the mayor about. I mean, they started out at like 0, and then I think they went to 8, so now they're at 35. But I just want everybody to know, yes, times are tough, but you know, there's a new report out that says imports have jumped as much as 28% for the first half of 2010. There's actually a group called Port Tracker, and they said recovery is underway. We've seen more increase. We're actually on the move. And then I have another report that says this year the Port of Los Angeles is spending the most money the port has ever spent in a decade on infrastructure projects. So fact of the matter is, cargo is coming through. We do have a recovery, and we're spending a lot of money, the most we've ever spent, which is good because that creates jobs. But I guess my point is the Harbor Department needs staff right now. We're embarking on the greatest infrastructure projects to make that port competitive. We're building terminals. We're dredging the main channel. We need staff to support that kind of growth. We're redeveloping a waterfront. So, you know, I think there's even more than 35 positions. And while I respect our president saying, let's bring them in here, I don't want to bring them in here. I think you got to just tell them. I think you just got to tell them. And that's where I was trying to encourage the mayor. Just tell your general managers, you've got to take these positions, because there's many of us on the council that do not obviously want to lay people off, and we think there's room for them in these other departments, and I don't want them to come and report why they can't. That's not going to be the spirit right now. They have to report how they're going to do it. You know, how are you going to take 100 people? How are you going to take? And there's projects going on at the port, I guarantee you, that could use this kind of staffing, help. So let's not let them off the hook even for 35. That's not enough. That's not enough. They're doing okay. Their revenues are coming in. These are positions that were budgeted for. The controller told us there was 1,200 positions either in specially funded or proprietary departments. So I'm kind of still hanging on to that report. And again, I don't want them in here telling us why they can't do it. Just tell them it's an emergency, it's a fiscal crisis, we're at the edge here, and everybody's got to participate in transfers of these positions. We got to make this one work. This has to work. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And in that vein, I encourage, as Mr. Reyes said, each committee chair to do that work, to hold your committees. I know it's tough with us meeting the entire week, but what we're looking at doing is making sure that there are at least 2 afternoons in those weeks. We're not doing all-day meetings every day, to allow the committee work to be done. That is critical. So you can do that with the port. We'll bring the port director in here as well. For next week, vis-a-vis what Mr. Park suggested, but you can also be doing that in your committees. And so, colleagues, I would encourage whatever departments you oversee, look at which positions are revenue generating to make sure both on furloughs and layoffs we're not shooting ourselves in the foot. Secondly, and that's a tough thing just to put on personnel and CAO right now. They're going to assist us, and the CLA is there to help us, but if we just instruct them to do that for every single department, on top of everything they're doing, this is our work, colleagues. This is our work to do. And so I can even put that formally in a letter to each of you, but I would encourage you to do that, to make time this month, to spend the time, have your staff do the homework on that ahead of those hearings, and really drill down in there. I also wanted to stand as well, give the city attorney the opportunity, because they were going to come forward, and vis-a-vis what the CAO said with the plan, can you add anything to that if you want to just come forward to the table? And then just before you answer that, the question after that, if the CAO could answer, and then I'll be done with my questions, is, in summary from what you said, are we on track? But how much are we off, as much as you can estimate, on the coalition savings that were to be generated? And how much of that is due to departmental mismanagement, if you will, and how much of it is due to timelines that have put us either behind or accelerated, so those savings are even further ahead than what we expected?
Well, it's specifically, we budgeted $77.8 million for the entire fiscal year. And keep in mind, the agreement was signed sometime in the fall. We're currently can capture 76.5, and we have 5.5 months left in the year, and so we're pretty much on target in terms of where we should be by the end of the fiscal year based on where we're at now.
So that's just one, in all the bad news we have, that's one good news thing that I want to give the coalition, our CAO, our department some credit for, because we're basically there with quite a few months to spare. If whatever we get is not exactly going to be gravy, because there is no gravy in this budget whatsoever. What it does is it lessens our challenge by even a little bit is helpful this year, because that's a lot of little bits is what's going to close this budget gap. But I do want the public, the press, our union partners and workers to know that the good work of the coalition, the good work of the managers in those departments, of this city council and city leadership has done that, and that's very important, because sometimes we're hearing we're way behind on this stuff. We're actually ahead of what the schedule is.
All right.
Go ahead. Ask Mr. Carter.
Good morning, Madam President and council members. William Carter, City Attorney's Office. I'll be speaking on a limited purpose this morning. I did submit, or the City Attorney's Office did submit on Tuesday, February 9th, a package of materials relating to the budget and some of the cost-saving and revenue-generating measures that we've been undertaking since July. I think if you'll see that we did have some questions about some of the numbers and figures that were set forth in the mid-year financial status report. We did question and challenge some of those. We have had an opportunity to present our numbers, which we think are more up to date to the CAO, and I think we've had a good working relationship over the last couple weeks in trying to correct some of the numbers in the FSR. But as they relate specifically to moving staff from the general fund to the special funded, we have had almost 100% success at this point in doing that. If you look at attachment 12 of the FSR, for our office, the City Attorney's Office, they identify 897 general funded bodies as of December 1st of 2009. The target for the FSR, in order to meet our obligation, in order to solve this year's deficit, is the CAO recommended that we hit a 750 general funded positions. We have met and will meet that number. The CAO believed that we would only be able to meet the 750 general funded position number as of June 30th, 2010 by laying off 100 of our staff. That is not accurate. We will not have to lay off any staff to meet our 750 number. The CAO calculated that, or presumed, that we would have to lay off 100 of our staff to meet that 750 general funded number. They calculated that those 100, they calculated it from the last in, first out, and they gave us a list on January 28th, and they calculated that if they did it their way, they would save $8.7 million doing it with those layoffs. We had another way, and we had a better way. Since July 1st of 2009, we have been working with the proprietaries and other special funded programs to move as many bodies as possible to these special funded positions. We have done the calculations, and we have in fact provided this to the CAO. Our calculations are these. By late March, early April of this year, we will meet the 750 body general funded positions. In fact, we will be at 736 based on our calculations. Those are based on ERIPS, natural attrition, and our transfers to special funded positions. This is exactly what the mayor came and talked to you about on Tuesday. That is what he's asking other departments to do. That is what I understand you as a council want us to do to avoid layoffs. We have been doing that. And based on our calculations, now remember the CAO thought if they laid off 100 of our people, last in, first out, they would save $8.7 million for the general fund. Well, based on the way that we've been doing it, if you annualize the numbers, we will save $13.5 million. That's what we've been doing, and that's what we commit to do. And I would hope that other departments can do that, and we've been fortunate that we've been able to work with the proprietaries and others to get those numbers to where we're at. We also have a number of other cost-saving and revenue-generating measures. We'll be more than happy to talk with all of you about that. I was able to talk with you yesterday about some of the collection. But we are doing our part, and we're more than happy to work with the council and the mayor and the CAO to do our part, and I think we have. Thank you.
May I respond?
Sure.
I think, first of all, to clarify, the 1,000 positions were not 1,000 layoffs. Every department, including that in my own office, we are recommending the elimination of positions, and we're encouraging departments to find any way to mitigate layoffs by doing exactly what the city attorney is doing and what's happening throughout the city in various departments. The second issue is, I think the discrepancy in the accounting has to do with the fact that we already accounted for all of the ERIP savings as part of a budget solution citywide. So while certainly it's appropriate and to not backfill those positions in the city attorney's office, the aggregate number that's part of our targeted budget for all ERIP savings is $47 million, which includes those positions that exist within the city attorney's office. And so we just have to be careful that we don't double count some of these numbers, because we already counted for it within the context of the overall ERIP program. But having said that, I think that as Mr. Carter indicated, we've made significant progress in the last several days to reconcile our numbers. As was pointed out at the hearing, the discrepancy in terms of what the deficit was mainly due to the time in which we looked at their numbers versus how much more updated they've been, and that information has been provided. The final thing I want to clarify is that the positions that have been identified in each department do not reflect the deficit that department has. If that would be the case, then the only departments that would be facing any elimination of positions would be the police department, the fire department, animal services, and which one else? And the city attorney. Those are the only 4 departments in the city that have deficits at the end of this year. But clearly, because the priority has been to mitigate any impact on the fire and police, the rest of the city has had to share in absorbing that impact, including my own office. So I just want to clarify, not only as it relates to the city attorney, but just across the board, that most departments are closing their budgets in the black. But virtually all departments are being asked to eliminate positions.
If I may respond, the problem that we have, and perhaps other departments have, is attachment 12 to the FSR, and it was the CAO's document that had a target projected on June 30th, and that was the basis on which they proposed the layoffs. I don't see any other basis. And so we've met our number at 750. With respect to a deficit, in fact, we've gone below it. With respect to and we've actually saving more money than the CAO proposed in the way we've done it. Between 8.7 is their numbers, 13.5 the way we decided to do it. And I'm following up on what Councilman Alarcon was asking the mayor. What does layoff really mean? Does layoff mean you're losing these bodies, or you're going to be able to move people the special funded positions. And the way I heard the mayor say it on Tuesday was ERIP, transfers, special funded, attrition. Let the departments, let the managers of the departments do what they can do to prevent losing bodies out the door. That's what we are doing. With respect to the deficit, as you probably understand and you saw in the document I presented on Tuesday, the city attorney's office was hit 18% last year. 18%. We also have, at the end of this year, we'll have maybe a $3 million deficit projected. Those are leftover. That's a leftover amount. There was a $1.7 million bill that was left over from last year from the previous administration. We received that, and we had to pay for it. There are also some tenured positions that we had to absorb from the previous administration. We think we can close that $3 million gap. We definitely believe we can close it based on some of the other cost-saving measures. We want to be given credit for that, and we don't believe that these layoff lists that have been proposed for the city attorney's office are fair. There's a moving target. We should be treated the same as other public safety agencies, because in the end we are a public safety agency. Because if you have police officers in the field, they're going to have to bring the cases to us, and we're going to be defending the liability of the city for every fire truck and every black and white and every sanitation truck that's on the street.
Thank you. Mr. Koretz is our next speaker.
Yeah, I just wanted to address furloughs and special funded positions. I've heard it mentioned here and there in passing that a particular department is furloughing their special funded people. This is the first time I've actually heard that the city established a policy at some point, presumably before I got here, that we would actually furlough people that don't cost us any money from the general fund. And one presumes that's done out of fairness, so people that are in general funded positions don't feel that they're not treated as well. But the fact is, that has to be costing us millions of dollars, maybe tens of millions of dollars in services, and at the back end, we wind up having to do other things to make up for that. So it's only contributing to the problem. Is that actually a policy, and can we not change that right now? Is there a good policy reason why we wouldn't make that change, stop losing millions of dollars, and use it to help solve the problem that we're trying to address?
We have discussed this issue within the context of ERC, and a final conclusion to that I anticipate will happen shortly. And again, I don't disagree with you. I think I think the concern at the time, and I think it predates both of us, is that, if I'm sitting here at this desk and he's sitting here at that desk, based on the revenue stream, I would get paid less than he would get paid less. And there was a concern at that time that it would create a level of animosity or just hostility within the working environment to have a situation where, based on a funding stream that you don't control, that the hours would be different and the pay would be different. I think the outcome of that has been exactly what you pointed out, is that we're not maximizing our ability to capture all of the grant-funded grants that we receive, or all the funding available to us in the special funds. So, in fact, multiple department heads have approached us and said, we're willing to sacrifice the equity issue of having two people doing the same job, sitting right next to each other but getting paid differently, in an effort to try to capture as much of the funding as possible. So that's something that the ERC is looking at, and we're hopefully reach some resolution within the next few weeks.
Well, rather than lose more money over the next few weeks, I'd like to make a motion that we direct our general managers and our CAO and CLA and anyone else involved to end this policy literally as soon as we can. I'd like to ask for a second on that and see if we can get that voted on perhaps today.
To end what policy?
Second. To end the policy that we have currently, as I understand it, to furlough special funded positions in the same way that we furlough general funded positions at a loss of many millions of dollars in productivity.
Councilman, if I may comment, I know the certain MOUs are subject to that.
Yeah, there are legal issues on that piece.
I'm not sure how that would apply. I have to get our labor attorneys here, but I know with respect to our office, there are certain MOUs or coalitions that are subject to that furlough. I know EAA is, and then MOU 32 is.
Yeah, there's been universal concurrence, I think, Mr. Kretz, on the intention of your motion. There have been some legal issues, so if we can flag it, maybe if we can get them in the session, if it's possible.
Can you get Zena here? Zena.
Well, no, let's talk about it even further. Let's actually get some of the answers from Mr. Kretz so we don't have to wait for another day. If it's possible, if they're around, let's inquire at least. If they're not, we'll understand.
We will ask our labor lawyers to come over, Zena Houston, perhaps Jennifer Hanslick, or
we'll ask the city attorney's advice too, of whether or not we are agendized to go into closed session on labor issues. If any of that requires us to go into closed session as well, please do advise us.
Thank you.
As to that. And so the motion has not been lost. I have my word on that. Mr. Labange is our next speaker.
If I'd like to ask Phyllis a question on a personnel issue. With all this, have you thought, would it be practical to check and see if a hall at the convention center could be made available? That all the people, because there's a lot of anxiety, which I hear, and these are very real stories of real people who are working or being affected. But as we go through this process, could people be requested to try to come to help to guide Ms. Hahn's discussion to try to place people, because it is we don't have a computer, a Palm Pilot, a Raspberry, a Blueberry. We just have what we have. To just BlackBerry. Thanks, Mr. Zine. We don't have that in our hands to find out. But if we called, because I'm told a number of employees have got letters, right? Okay, how many people have gotten letters?
We sent notification to over 4,000 people.
Okay, so 4,000 people, and working with labor for all issues, but also working in a form of sense of, okay, let's say those 4,000 people were invited at certain hours to, how fast are they getting counseling or direction? How immediately does it happen? I mean, this is what I'm asking, because this is an earthquake they believe is going to happen to the budget of the city of Los Angeles. There's an earthquake. If that earthquake, you want people to survive the earthquake. There may be some displacement, but you want them to survive and somehow find out how we can survive it. If General Manager X has an opportunity to take 17 positions from General Manager Y, how fast is that information included? Is there a way that if in 10 days from now, let's say a week from Saturday, we find a location, or maybe a little bit more time because it should be organized? Because the complicated thing is there's rules, which most of us don't know the rules. Maybe Mr. Zine does, and Mr. Parks knows it better, Richard, because he worked at personnel. But I've been here 35 years, and I've been civil service exempt, and I don't know the rules by heart that bounces one person from a job. Those who work for council offices could be asked today to say, thank you, we appreciate your service, and that is the end of their service at this time for the city, basically. But there's a bunch of rules that we're not totally familiar with that we should make sure, because we're making the decisions on this. We're making the decisions on this. And I would want to know from the table if it would be helpful if we try to have some type of outreach to the mass amount of people who are going to be affected, to try to direct it, to try to be able to save some people, but at the same time, save money, restructure, retool, recommit, but find out how we could do it. Have you thought about that?
Yes, actually we did. That's where we started. We started with the idea that we would have a job fair and invite everyone to come to the job fair and have the departments there and make on-the-spot decisions about hiring. And we moved to what we're currently doing last Thursday, when we were asked to accomplish filling the special funded vacancies with general funded people by tomorrow. And that caused us to move more quickly. So what we did is we were asked to do this on Wednesday night. We began Thursday reaching out to departments, talking to them about how we accomplish it. We sent notices to the general manager and met with the general managers on Thursday. On Friday, we sent notices to the employees as well as an application form developed just for this and an online system developed just for this. And from what we can tell, we also developed an online transfer document that can go from one department to another department to the employee, all so this could happen by tomorrow. And we're hopeful, because there are 300 direct class-to-class transfers that could occur, we're hopeful we may see as many as 300 transfers happen in about a week's time.
Right.
So that, I think the idea of a job fair is an excellent one, and I think we can revisit that when we have
when we get through this process.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's very critical. Thank you, Phyllis.
Thank you, Mr. LeBons. Mr. Weezer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Carter, can I ask you a question? I'm sorry, I just want to follow up on some of the comments you made earlier. You earlier sent out, earlier this week or last week, sent out a memo indicating that you do not believe the mayor had the right by executive order to lay off 100 people in your office. And so when you talk here about the proposed layoffs, 100, you're directing it really to the council in any action we may take. Yes. In terms of not giving the city attorney office the funds for those positions, correct? Is that so? You're directing it to council, correct? Because you still believe that the mayor does not have the authority to unilaterally.
Well, to correct it, it was not a memo. I sent an email to our staff based on reports in the media about what was intended and what other people were saying. As I understand it, under the charter, yes, the mayor is the chief executive officer of the city. However, once you have directors and general managers, they have independent authority to take whatever action they're going to take. With respect to our office, we look to the council for direction on budget. And in the event the mayor were to do something that was not authorized under the charter, the council could reinstate those people that were laid off that may have been in violation of the charter. So our office looks to the council for direction as to our budget and what to do with respect to layoffs. So we are directing our comments to you as to how to go forward. But with respect to the CAO and the FSR, we have very clear and strong views about whether those are accurate or not. And so we're dealing with the CAO on that and the mayor on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Which begs the question, Mr. CAO, so what's our scorecard in terms of the 1,000 layoffs? If the mayor is talking about 1,000 layoffs, where are they going to come from if they're not? There's not 100 from the city attorney's office. There's also we're keeping track of how many could actually transfer to proprietaries. Where is that 1,000? How are we keeping that scorecard so you can inform us about where we are in terms of our savings?
You know, again, it's not 1,000 layoffs. It's the elimination of 1,000 positions.
1,000 positions.
And so once, I think, from talking to the personnel department, I think in the next several days we'll know how many of those 365 positions that are vacant will be filled. Hopefully all of them will be. And then perhaps Ms. Hahn could persuade the Harbor Department to find another 100 in the Harbor Department. I think within the next 30 days, we'll have a better sense as to how many of those positions remain. As the city attorney indicated, you know, they're moving aggressively and have been to move as many general fund attorneys into a special fund or proprietary funded position. So some of those positions within the attorney's office will be dramatically reduced. So I think this is the period where all the shifting is happening. And hopefully within the next 2 weeks we'll have a number as to how many are left. In terms of savings, we count a shift from a general fund to a special fund in the same way that we count it as a layoff, because the whole goal is to generate the general fund savings, and it still does that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And in terms of Mr. Carter's
after this
point,
question, if you'll press your button again. After
can I ask one question? Then?
Yeah, go ahead and then press your button.
In terms of Mr. Carter's point about leaving it up to general managers to decide for themselves, hey, this is our fiscal situation for the city. Our goal is, because it's going to save us $65 million for next year, to save $65 million, we have looked at your department for possibly these many positions. You tell us what you think, as opposed to what we did here. I think the CAO or somebody told the departments, these are the positions we're going to cut from your budget. What about that point that Mr. Carter raised? Why couldn't we go that way?
You know, I had an opportunity to meet with the general managers about 2 weeks ago, and I expressed to them that given the short amount of period that we had, that we didn't engage in the kind of sort of dialogue that I would have liked to engage in terms of identifying which positions. I think as a result, you know, our target is our target number, and at the end of the day, our goal is to capture as many of those positions within the general fund and allow the flexibility within the department to figure out how that looks like. The reality is that this is unfortunately not the only time we'll be engaged in this process. It's very likely that as we move forward on the budget for next year, we're going to have to identify another round of positions to eliminate, and we'll have more time to build a consensus between my office and the general managers as to which positions those should be and which ones are the ones that are actually listed.
If I can follow up on that, council member. Obviously, we as general managers of the department want that kind of flexibility mentioned by the CAO, and that's why we believe our plan is better. The CAO's proposal was to save $8.6 million annualized next year for our office. Our plan will realize $13.5 million based on the plan that we are implementing. So if it's about saving money, our plan is doing that $5 million more than the CAO's plan. That's why the general managers need that flexibility. That's why when the FSR is published, we rely on it. They should rely on it. We shouldn't have a moving target. Give the general managers the authority to hit that number. We'll hit it or beat it, which we are doing.
Mr. Alarcon is our next speaker.
I think this goes back to this being pension.
Yeah, it seems to me a lot of this consternation and angst could have been avoided if we talked about reduction in workforce as opposed to layoffs. Everything in the media, everything has been in the context of layoffs, when in fact that's not what we were talking about. There was the notion that to get to the reduction in workforce, it might require layoffs. But frankly, when you put out that list, that layoff list that got leaked to the LA Times, that put us in a whirlwind of problems, and I believe it undermined our good faith negotiations with our labor units. And so can we backtrack and come at it from a different perspective? And he mentioned that the CAO had a goal of 750 authorized general fund positions. Do you have a goal for every department, and maybe that's the list we should be working from? And just ask the general managers, will you be able to meet your goal, and tell us how you're going to meet your goal, and if you can't meet it, why not? Instead of us saying, cut 50 staff, which may be better than your goal or not, I don't know. So can we get a list of for each department, general funded positions, how many you want them to have? And I believe that'll avoid a whole lot of problems. It'll also give the opportunity for our labor units to offer their suggestions on how to get to that goal, as opposed to trying to fight for protecting people from getting laid off. Again, our goal is not just about preserving city jobs. It's about preserving city services that are vital to our public. That's why it's not because we want to save a city employee and all the problems that they would have with layoffs, as much as we've got a commitment to provide service to our public, and they expect that, regardless of what our budget situation is. And if we can't explain to them that we cut this position for the right reasons, they're not going to accept that when their trees aren't getting trimmed and their streets aren't getting swept. In fact, we get those complaints already, but it'll just be exacerbated. So do you have those numbers for each department, first of all, and can we get that list?
Certainly we could put it together and share it with all of you.
So you don't have that?
I don't have it with me, no.
No, but do you have it? I mean, do you have those goals?
I'm sure each one of our analysts has that number. We can compile it and share it with all of you and the general managers.
And in the context of how well they're doing and whether they're on goal or not.
Right.
That would be helpful.
I think that, this is the difficult part of the work that we're engaged in. I mean, there's been concern that, for example, there are members of the coalition that are on the list for position reductions. And I've tried to be as careful as possible to describe him as that. And I can't say maybe I didn't slip a couple of times and refer them to layoffs, but that my intention has always been as the reduction of positions, not necessarily layoffs. But the point that I'm trying to make is that as we move forward on this process, one of the things that there was a concern about is that if we identify a list that includes coalition members on it, knowing full well that we can't lay off a coalition member this year, then we wouldn't be giving that member the opportunity to consider a transfer to another position if there wasn't a list to start from. And so we were trying to reconcile that. Otherwise, what it could potentially have happened as one of the unintended consequences of all of this is that only those non-coalition members would have appeared on a list, thus filling all of the positions available in proprietaries and special funds and not making them available for coalition members at any other point. So we were trying to provide as much information so that people took whatever action they felt was necessary to ensure employment in the city.
Thank you. We have two more speakers, and then colleagues will be turning to the special meeting, Mr. Reyes and Ms. Hahn. Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. I wanted to ask Arceo a question in regards to the direction I'm hoping we can take this discussion about our personnel. One is that, would it be possible to put together, for lack of a better word, a template of questions or issues every chairperson that chairs the committee that oversees certain departments, to get to some of that more finite discussion as to what positions are needed to make sure the city continues to operate efficiently, and drill down to that point where we understand that there's certain functions we just can't give up. For example, the other day I found out that we have one welder in the fire department and he's taking ERIP. So we have one welder in the whole fire department. So if that apparatus breaks, what do? So it's a microcosm of how we keep departments moving. But is that something that we could look towards you to provide, so that way the respective chairpersons have something to work with when it comes down to engaging that question, and hopefully fold in the discussion with the coalition and the union stakeholders in that process?
We'll be happy to facilitate that. And let me just clarify what is the kind of information that you're trying to garner through this template.
Okay, so I'm seeking those positions that are revenue generating, one, but two, let's say there's, for example, in the planning department, we have zoning administrators that are leaving. Without zoning administrators, we're not going to be able to process cases. Without processing cases, we're not going to have development. So many of the projects in our cities are going to stagnate. We have community planners that are literally being phased out. Without community planners, we're not going to be able to define where housing should go, where commercial activity should go in the future, and that begins a downward spiral when it comes to how the city evolves, and our general fund pie continues to decrease. So people say, well, what good is it now if there's no development anyway? Well, now is the time to get ready for the upswing. And this is the window that we can't miss. So that's what I meant about the short-term return and not losing perspective on the long-term gain by understanding the value of those positions.
Okay. So that I'm clear, and I'll recap. I think what you're trying to achieve is a way of being able to, number one, capture what the operational impact has been so far of everything we've done in the last year. So from those individuals who have left this city service through early retirement to those individuals that perhaps are transferring from a general fund position to a special fund position, whether inside the department or somewhere else. And so sort of an assessment of what is it that, if I'm a department, what is it that I have left? And an analysis of how that actually impacts my ability to meet my mission. Right? Okay. And then from that, so that I'm clear, you're also wanting to understand or provide some, you're asking us to help provide some direction on how to assist the department in identifying ways to mitigate those impacts and to possibly identify additional efficiencies based on future needs and future demands that will be placed on the department.
Yes.
And so I think all of that is very helpful, and it's part of the process that we'll engage in when we do next year's budget. And we could certainly put a framework. Now that work, as you indicated, would be very helpful if it's done within the context of the committees as well. Each one of you chair a committee, you provide certain expertise, and that's where what's helpful for us to understand, and certainly a department, is what are the most important things you believe that department should do? If you were to define the core mission of the department to its very essence, what would that look like? And what are the things that could perhaps be sacrificed or not done anymore as we begin to downsize the size of our government?
I just think it allows us to incrementally get a hold of this massive movement and be much more efficient and wiser in our decisions. And within the framework of the committee, it also, colleagues, speaks to the role of this policymaking body. Do we really want to eliminate all the community planners, given what's at stake? I mean, these are policy issues that falls back on us, but that the results of this information is packaged so that we can more efficiently and get reports back for you, I think a turnaround would be much tighter. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one more thing. Yes.
Councilmember, members of the CAO's office, the budget analysts, and our classification analysts in the personnel department began meeting with city departments in January, right after the holidays. In fact, just before the holidays, we sent a notice to departments talking about the very problem you're discussing with ERIP and attrition and movement to special funds. What are your core functions? Where do you see your department going? What help do you need from both the CAO and the personnel department to achieve your core functions? And the meetings that we've had thus far have been very beneficial, but right now there's so many balls in the air, I think we're still trying to analyze exactly what it all means.
But I think it also puts the onus on every council member in this horseshoe to be very clear as to what that department does or doesn't do, and be part of that constructive discussion as opposed to trying to figure out, okay, where's the roadmap? Where are we going next? Who made that decision? I mean, it really pulls in every member of this horseshoe to be part of that level of discussion, and that's what I think we need. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can just ask folks as well on both sides of the aisle to please keep their conversations to minimum or to take them outside. That would be helpful for us to be able to follow the conversations going on in here. Thank you for that. Ms. Han is our last speaker before we go to the special meeting. Ms. Han?
Ms. Han. Thank you. Well, yesterday when I was talking about how I thought layoffs were the wrong way to go because it's about the economy, apparently the Newsweek editors were watching Channel 35. Look at the cover this week. Layoffs are bad for business. The downside of downsizing. And I know, well, now we're using a different word. We're talking about elimination of positions, which it was my thing all along, was let's figure out a way to keep people employed, to not have people who are now not paying their mortgages, not paying their bills, not shopping in their shops, not contributing to the sales tax revenue. But that seems like what we're trying to do. And in that vein, I do know that on the hit list of layoffs were 3 full-time positions in the harbor area associated with some of our museums, which I believe are reimbursable through the Harbor Department. I think we do this annual billing to the Harbor Department for some of those positions. Again, and I don't know, our president asked us to drill down on this and for us to do the work, which is fine, but, again, particularly down in the harbor area, there are rec and parks positions that are 100% reimbursable by the Harbor Department. So let's not, again, lay those people off. Those are specially funded positions. Let's really do a good job of tracking that, finding out what positions those are, and not target them for layoffs. I think that doesn't make any sense right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to the special meeting, I did want Tom from Lacers to maybe walk us through something that a number of us had asked for, was a verbal report on the merits of reducing the 30 to 60-day retirement processing period. This has been something that we've heard also from our unions and others, so maybe we could just get an oral report on that, and then we'll move to the special meeting.
Sure. Currently, the administrative...
And if you can move the microphone a little closer, can't quite hear you. Thank you.
Currently, the administrative code requires that Lacers members who want to apply for retirement have to apply at least 30 days prior to their retirement. Waiving that for individuals would allow members to retire more quickly if they choose to retire, or if by chance there are layoffs down the road, it would allow them to retire without going into a deferred vested status, which might compromise their retirement rights in some cases. So for non-ERIP related retirements, it would be helpful to our members and also perhaps to departments to allow for the waiver of that 30-day requirement.
Okay. Does anybody want to follow up with any questions on that? I know that had been very important information for members. Mr. Alico?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that this is the thing that we got, and I don't have to show all of it, but just to say that the title says potential layoff list. This is coming from your office. This was the first document that I believe created a whirlwind of consternation and angst amongst our employees that was unnecessary, because we were talking about job elimination and nobody had a problem with that discussion, but we had a problem with cutting services and laying people off.
And thank you for clarifying that, and emphasize that it clearly says potential on there. And I shared that with, I think, all of you days before our report became public. I certainly would have, any input at that time would have been helpful, as well as any input on changing the makeup of that list. And frankly, I didn't receive any feedback from any council member on the makeup of that list at that time.
And Mr. Kretz made it very clear, and Ms. Hahn made it very clear that we have a problem with layoffs, given the information that we had at that point. That is just flat wrong.
Okay. Anything else on the Lacers 30 to 60 days piece? If not, we have that motion forward. Thank you for the input on that today, and we'll see what we can do to alter that. Mr. Smith?
Well, one thing I brought up, and I actually brought up 5 years ago, and the council moved along to both the pension system boards, and that is the smoothing concept of expanding the smoothing. Our police fire expanded smoothing to 7 years. 7 to 10 is logical. Lacers rejected the proposal. I would like to ask them once again to consider that, because smoothing is an important long-term element to the contribution rate that we make to from the general fund to the pension system. The state of California is 15 years. Most cities are 7 to 10. We're at 5. And most economic cycles run in 7 to 10 year cycles. So it makes sense to match the 7-year cycle. I would like to add an amendment that we request one more time that this board consider smoothing upward of 5 years to at least 7, if not 10 years. So
I'll second that.
Thank you.
And our board did take a look at that issue as recently as this last September and did expand the corridor to 5150, which allowed the city the most immediately funding relief that is possible. Our board, as recently as last September, looked at this issue of the corridor and the smoothing period and did expand the corridor to the 5150 corridor, which gave the city the most immediate relief in its contributions to Lacers that would have been provided under either expanding the corridor or the smoothing period. Excuse me.
Thank you, and we're glad that piece happened. We'd like to communicate to reiterate the second piece as well, and we'd love for the board to consider that. Thank you. We will continue this, and including Mr. Kretz's motion, we'll keep on the table if that's okay, but we'll continue this item until Tuesday. If there's no objection, since some of these items we're going to continue to discuss, and we want to get regular updates on that. Okay, without objection. So ordered. If we can call the roll for the special meeting, please.
Mr. President, I'm sorry, just for clarification, then on 21 there's no action and 22 was received and filed, and
Correct.
then would you like to adjourn this meeting and then...
Yes, we'd like to adjourn the regular meeting and call the roll for the special meeting.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Hahn, Weezer, Koretz, Krikorian, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Wesson-Stein, Garcetti, 12 members present, and a quorum, Mr. President.
Okay. Colleagues, we have the special meeting agenda before us. We have items 1 through 6. Is there anybody who wishes to call any of these special? I think we have different items here that are before us. Mr. Weezer.
Number 3, please.
Okay. Mr. Weezer, number 3. Why don't we call 2 through 6 special? I'll call them all special. I think we should discuss them all. Anybody wishing to call number 1 special? That's just whether we want to go in closed session. I think we don't need that. That's a standing item. So if not, we'll continue that into the next meeting as well. Or actually, should we continue it, or should we just...
Mr. President, either way, you can either take no action on it, or if you wish, you can continue it to the Tuesday meeting.
We'll keep it on the table in case anything comes up in the meantime. With that, Mr. Parks, did you want to frame the discussion for the other P3 or partnership ideas here, the 2 through 6, just in the broadest terms, to reflect the Budget Committee and the CAO's work on this, and then we'll turn it over to the CAO, and then folks who've called...
Thank you, Mr. President.
Item special. Thank you.
Certainly, and appreciate the staff being there. In the 3-year report, the CAO has laid out a number of initiatives to evaluate as it relates to, if we call it P3, or looking at ways that we maintain the asset and have managers come in to address it. But it's a variety of ways and a variety of services that are within the city. Today, what we hope to take up is 4 of them that deal with the issues of the street sweeping, golf, El Pueblo, and then the multifamily refuge collection. But colleagues, I think what we need as we go forward on this is to certainly get some clarity, because I think every time we talk about P3s, we may have a different idea of what it means, and we need to get the clarity as to how these activities will function, what we need the CAO to bring back to us, what we're looking at. And one of the things I think is important, that if we're only cutting dollars, we're helping the budget, but if we're not finding a way to continue the service, we're now hurting the public. And so our goal should be, in some fashion, to look at ways to where we do not lose our assets, but on the other hand, we protect the budget and we find a way in which the public is going to continue to be served. And so I think, in general, today with those 4, and there's many others that are in the P3 report, that will be forthcoming over time. But I think these were selected today just to get us started. Last Tuesday, we all unanimously, I believe, voted on the continued study of the parking lot structures. We also made a definitive statement as to moving forward with LADOT on an RFP for the parking meters. But the significant number of ideas that the city CAO has come forward with on the 3-year report all are worth evaluating. And one of the things I'd hope that we can do is give the CAO the clear guidance on these issues so that we're not wasting their time just generating paper that's not going to go anywhere. So that's the whole purpose of this discussion. Certainly, we're going to have people with different ideas. You're going to have those that would say, outsourcing is bad. You have those who are going to say, keep doing what we're doing. There's a variety of things, but in reality, we're going to have to find a way to save money and provide the maximum amount of service to the public. So, Miguel, we can start off with, I think we start off with the street sweeping and go through that list, and then golf, El Pueblo, and then multi-family.
Thank you. What I propose, colleagues, is why don't we go through these one at a time. CEO, if you want to make any general comments about kind of the overall approach and charge you've been given, and then we can dig into the first one on street sweeping after that.
Sure. Just in general, I think, each service requires a different approach in terms of what we're recommending here today. To clarify, in the area of street sweeping, we're not recommending contracting out street sweeping. What we are recommending is that we direct the department to report back on a better way of identifying how to prioritize the work that they do in light of some of the losses that they've experienced.
I'm sorry, Mr. CEO. If we can get everybody again, just one more round, please. If you can take conversations out of the chambers, either if you're on this side behind the chambers or if you're on that side outdoors, please. These are very serious matters. These are very important issues. These impact people's lives, their levels of services, the work, city workers, and the jobs that they have. It's incumbent upon us all, colleagues, to really focus on each one of these. While there's not some sort of final decisions being made today, if we don't take the time to listen, to hear these, we will not have the agency to make those decisions that are critically important to balancing our budget and maintaining level of services and maintaining the jobs of folks who provide those services. So please, I would ask you again to move those conversations outside. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Sure. Again, our recommendation is not that we contract out street sweeping, but rather that we direct the department to work with our office to identify a better way to prioritize the work that is done as a result of the positions that have been that have left the department through ERIP. And so that's one of our primary recommendations. Second to that is looking at how we could generate even more general fund savings and rather revenue so that we can continue to maintain the street sweeping program. I'll go ahead and have my staff walk us through the details of that proposal.
Okay. Mark Troy, Office of the CAO. In making our recommendation, we looked at what other jurisdictions are doing and what we have within street services as far as 135 motor sweepers that are CNG operated. We have trained staff of 100 positions, a motor sweeper operator, and we have a close communication between our Department of Transportation with regard to citations and the street sweeping function, and we felt that that was a best way to continue that operation as it exists today and modify the program because of the ERIP losses to look at those that are low trash areas and work with the department to identify what they are. We would continue to maintain the posted routes, which are weekly. The affected routes would be those that are actually swept once a month. They are non-posted routes, and we could possibly, in the low trash areas, bring that to one sweeping cycle every 2 months.
Okay.
Any questions?
We do have a number of folks. Mr. Smith, Mr. LaBonge, and Ms. Hahn. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm glad Mr. Robertson is here. Maybe he should come to the table as well as the operator of the system. One of the concerns I have, and first of all, I'm very happy to see a proposal come forward and say we're not going to contract this out. In fact, we can make ourselves stronger by contracting other cities maybe. I like those kind of discussions. I think most of the union folks will applaud that for a change. But I have some concerns, and one is while we say we're going to maintain the restricted parking areas, and we do make a lot of money from citations there, that we're going to reduce in some ways the non-restricted areas, which happens to be half of the city approximately. So for half the city, you're going to take and reduce the amount. You say it's 4 weeks. I think it's more like 6 weeks is the real cycle. But you're going to reduce it, and it's still conform to state law, but you're reducing service areas. And I don't think it takes into account certain things that you'll find starting in Mr. Krikorian's district, running all along the hillsides, down into the central area in LaBonge's district, where you have seasonal problems, where you have a lot of trash problems with winds that blow in the winter months, the dropping of leaves from our city trees, where you have a tremendous accumulation of debris that's not trash, but debris in our curb systems that we want to have up, and I don't think 2 months works in those areas. So I don't think moving to a standardized system of saying we're just going to do it every 2 months is a realistic approach to this very large, complex city. So, Mr. Robertson, do you have some?
No, I would agree, Councilmember Smith. And the reality is we don't just plan to go to a 2-month. What we do is every month throughout the city we have an internal report where our supervisors actually look and gauge the debris on the street. There are certainly some areas of the city that could be swept every 3 months. But as you indicated, there are some areas, especially heavy leaf fall during the fall.
Where you live. But
we actually have to send equipment in to scrape the leaves before we can sweep because that's just too much. So we have identified those areas of the city where we think that we must maintain the once every 4 weeks or once every 5 weeks. There's certainly those areas that we can go to 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and in some rare cases where we could go to 3 months. So we aren't just going to cookie cutter the response. It's going to be based on the actual need, and we will certainly work with the council members and the neighborhood councils to identify those critical areas where we need to maintain the current level of service.
And would that be also seasonal? Would you move forces at different times of the year into different areas as well? Or once you set this standardized sweeping, that's it?
That's currently the way we do it now. Based on, we have a number of posted routes, some areas, like Mr. Parks, where it's almost all restricted parking, where we have mandates, we have to be there, so we move resources. During the heavy leaf fall season out in the valley, we move resources. So we're very aware of the individual needs throughout the communities, and we'll just have to continue to do that. We're going to have less resources, but we think it's manageable.
Okay. Now, what are the opportunities in the upcoming bond proposal before the county for wastewater? And I know Mr. LaBonge has been right on point on this. I'll let him talk about that. But is there discussion about including that in there and expanding the system?
To be honest, I am not familiar with that.
Okay. No. Well, you better get familiar because I know Tom's going to ask that question. And then finally, last question is, what are our opportunities in a P2 configuration where we would actually look to other cities and offer the service?
That's key. A couple of years ago, we were actually contacted by the city of San Fernando that wanted us to take over their street sweeping. And we made an offer that we could go ahead. We would paint a sweeper whatever color they wanted and just include it in our normal sweeping. We have opportunities maybe with Culver City. We have a current MOU with LA County where we're sweeping some of the non-incorporated areas for them so they don't have to send a sweeper 25 miles into the city just to get there. Yeah. So there's huge opportunities out there where we can expand our street cleaning and possibly bring in some revenue that would be at least cover the cost.
Okay, thank you for that. I know Tom wants to follow up, but I just want to add one last thing. The report says that there's an efficiency in moving the street citation unit of parking enforcement to Bureau of Street Services. I will continue to push to putting that in the police department where it belongs, where it started, and ask then the police department to dedicate a morning unit to work with you on citation program, so kind of be under your control at that time, but remain where it belongs in the police department. So, Mr. CAO, when we come to that discussion, I'm going to push very hard for putting it back in the police department where it belongs, and then just say we can dedicate a unit to you to work on every morning on those citations. So with that, well, I think, Mr. Zeitz is second that. It's further discussion that I think there's going to be a number of us, and Mr. Parksville I know agree as well, that believe that's where it belongs. So when you have that discussion, just for your history, it started in the police department. It was taken away for nothing other than political purposes, to get even with the chief of police at that time. So it has no sense of reasonableness where it is today. It belongs back in the police department. So.
Thank you. Mr. LaBonge is our next speaker.
Thank you very much. Well, I wanted to say street cleaners are very important, and the process is it. I know there was a time when we had a problem, and this was in the 70s, and the only thing that really, the only structural movement of people who lost positions and I don't know if they lost jobs, but there were a fifth person on an engine company that was reduced to 4, that's the fire department, and there were 247 trucksters that were eliminated. They were the gentlemen who would be a three-wheeler, and they'd go to Broadway, they'd do Wilshire, they'd do Hollywood Boulevard, Ventura Boulevard, etc. And all that reality, though, in the time, and I wish Detective Sergeant Ito's over there in the corner, but this example, I don't even know if he knows. How many tickets have we given for littering in Los Angeles this last year, do you know?
That's a good point, Mr. Labange, because I know that we've worked with your office.
Yeah, it's easier for this microphone. I love you, Bill, but you speak to the microphone and everybody hear you.
I think we've worked on this for almost 5 years going back, that we should be citing people for littering.
Right, well, there's a suggestion by labor that we should enhance the opportunity for enforcement in many things, which I think would be a good tool for you, wherever that ends, because they don't issue tickets for this. I'm very much about that. I have some exhibits here. Here's Exhibit A. This is a storm drain. So everything off the street comes through this drain and fills Exhibit B, the river. Okay? And then when the river goes down, you see all the debris that came off the streets that's in the river. I know Mr. Reyes, who's been a champion for this, is concerning. And then come down to San Pedro, comes to Long Beach, and this is a drain. I don't know if Enrique is still here from sanitation. I do believe in following the trash. There should be a study, Mr. CAO, that puts sanitation in with the street cleaning business. Maybe not next year, but soon, because it makes sense to follow the trash. You clean the drains. These drains gets backed up. I think these were drains at St. George Street and With Park Boulevard, but I know San Pedro was hit heavy by drain closures, and we want to heal the bay and we want to keep it out of it. Maybe we'll have to look at that. But I would contest us on the issue of people get upset when the street cleaner comes on trash day. They think we're inefficient, and we should try to coordinate that a little better. But also we should tell them, and maybe now with our neighborhood councils, when a motor sweeper, and Mr. Robertson, who's been one of our most effective bureau chiefs in this street services, we've worked where, and I don't know the number, but I want to say it was maybe $725. We had a motor sweeper on a Saturday in a neighborhood in the Hollywood Hills, and everybody loved it. And we paid it with the GCP fund that is an important tool for council offices. I just want to see the CAO's face when I say that. And it's an important tool, and the people loved it. And maybe it's just one time a year there in some of these neighborhoods. I live on a street, Bill, and I've lived there 8 years. It's the same neighborhood, lived in the same zip code my whole life, but the sweeper only came 3 or 5 times, whatever. Came a little more when John Nelson was working the Hollywood Yard. But anyway, Mr. President, cleaning is important. I think we should address this to see what it is. But I think we could increase. This is one question for the CAO. Do we know from our Department of Transportation of the citations 438,212 are street cleaning citations? Or should we know that? Because I know we would know that?
Yeah, the estimate collected annually is between 35 and 45 million in citations from street sweeping.
For street cleaning. So I think it's even important. I know Mr. Alico, when he's here, the last go-round, you were a champion for street cleaning in your district to expand it, and even the revenue that you get on weekly sweeping is an enhanced thing. And all that takes it out of the drain, takes it out of the sewer system or the storm drain system, out of the river, out of the ocean, out of the fish, and then whatever you eat, it's cleaner. Thank you.
Ms. Hahn. Sorry. I thought you meant vis-a-vis him. Ms. Perry.
Thanks very much. Mr. Robinson, I know that you are always keeping your finger on the pulse of needs in various communities, and I just wondered if you can give me just a pithy analysis of how this is all going to impact the area known as the Toy District. And as you know, they decided not to renew their BID, and it's a high-volume trash area. And we don't have a solution in place yet, although I know we're all working together to try to find one. in the context of these budget issues. So what do you see ahead for the Toy District?
I think what we're going to have to do, and again, Mr. Smith brought up a good point, we're basically going to have to do what LAPD does. We're going to have to put the resources where the needs are. Certainly the Toy District, even the Fashion District, with some of the debris we see there, we're going to have to expend the resources there, which means other parts of the city that may not have the same need are going to see their frequencies slip a little bit. I think that's just a reality. But certainly we need to meet the need and the demands that are critical to those areas of the city where trash and debris severely impacts businesses, the residents, and just basically quality of life.
One thing I want to put on the record, so, I've been with the city for a while, and so have you. And in some areas, when people put the trash out, they're actually, dare I say this publicly, dumb enough to leave it with the address labels on, so it was always easy to go back and issue citations. And we should probably thank them, because that gives us a chance to collect on the cost of people having no regard for the cleanliness of the public right-of-way. And so I just want to put that out there, because we're going to have to be aggressive, and I'm glad you mentioned LAPD, because they can actually help us in the issuance of those citations, so we can collect back on the money that we expend to be able to enforce what people should be able to do on their own, but for whatever reason they don't.
That's absolutely correct, and Mr. Labange brought it up again. We currently have 3 ordinances with the city attorney, or new ordinance or ordinance changes that allow us to cite people. And I'm not talking about, citing a $1,000 fine. These are fines that when you see something, maybe it's a $50 fine the first time, $75 the second time, $150 the third time. But certainly, and our neighborhood councils are well aware of this, that there is a huge responsibility that the residents share, the business owners share, and they need to do their part to help the city. And certainly, if they don't do that, then the city has the ability, hopefully when these ordinances are passed, that we can collect additional revenue to offset our costs for having to do it for them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weezer.
Thank you. Would we be able to see, have you done some projections as to how much revenue some of these new ordinances will bring in? I know one of them has a first offense of $500, second offense $1,000, and so there are going to be some stiff penalties that your workers will have the authority through administrative process to give these citations. If we adopt these by July, and would you be able to provide us with projections as to how much revenue this may bring in, so that we could hopefully know how much more money you're going to have for the following year to do these types of services?
We'd be glad to work on that with the CAO and do that projection. Okay,
good. So we're hoping to schedule this before July in Public Works Committee to have that information available, so we could put that in for the next fiscal year. Help do a lot of the work we're talking about here. And I would like to ask the CAO, if you could, we know we have a 30-day to come back to council. If we could have this report with that's a short period of time, but we want to schedule this in Public Works Committee to vet it out, given all the other, in context of some of the other moving pieces of this, so we could somehow have that report brought to the Public Works Committee. We'll work with my staff to schedule a meeting. We'll schedule a special meeting if we have to before it comes to council. We could work on that, please. Thank you.
And with those, we'll work with everybody on those. What we're doing with all of those motions, colleagues, is having like a date certain. So let's, during this meeting, figure out what that date is. It's usually one to 2 weeks, which is, I know, a quick turnaround for committees, but we need that to be able to make sure at the beginning of the month we're on track with our budget. So Mr. Reyes is our next speaker.
Thank you, Council President. And first, I want to thank you and your department for all the great work they've done. In my district, we have a lot of experiences that makes you scratch your head and say, why, and how is that possible? We get folks who come in from the outside and literally with a dump truck will fill half a street in my district with debris, 3-4 feet high, almost to the waist. And you say, well, why here, and who would do such things? But it does speak to the issue of cost. A good portion of my district, especially in the flatlands, where you have the highest densities and highest poverties, you got a large population of tenants. And so how we impose fees and how it hits those populations, I think, is something that I know you're very in tune with.
Yep.
And just by the way your department has responded. But when we start going to private-public partnerships, the rules begin to change. And so how we impact these communities is something that's of great concern of mine, given the extraordinary densities. I mean, 70,000 people per square mile is the norm in some of the neighborhoods I represent. The city average is 6,000 to 7,000. So what it means in trash pickup, wear and tear, debris on the curbs, multiplies itself. Does that reciprocate with cost? I mean, I'm just hoping that's in the radar as you go forward.
No, absolutely. And one of the key issues, and I think the CAO has already mentioned, this certainly, street sweeping is not an element that should be or even considered as a public-private partnership. And I'll just say one word about public-private partnerships. We have to realize as a city that true public-private partnerships, and I happen to have one of the strongest public-private partnerships that's been in existence for 9 years, that is being copied across the nation. Matter of fact, on March 3rd, I've been invited to go to Sacramento to speak to a cooperation of cities that are looking to do the very same thing that we do in our public-private partnership in Slurry Seal. For a number of years, our biggest cost with Slurry Seal was the fact that it was mixed on-site. We invaded our neighborhoods, stacked aggregate everywhere, created dust. We couldn't maintain the machines. It was just a horrible experience for everyone involved. And we found that 50% of what we put down had to be redone. So we created a public-private partnership where we now use central mixed rubberized Slurry Seal. We have no maintenance costs whatsoever. Our partner in this partnership, they're responsible for the truck. They supply the truck operator, and my crews put it down. So we've eliminated our risk on the maintenance side, which is one of the biggest costs. So as we move forward looking at public-private partnerships, there has to be a sharing of risk between who's our partners are. Can't just be a contractor, because they have to be willing to share the risk with the city. And certainly the city's goal should be to reduce its risk at some level. And certainly our Slurry Seal program is being copied all over the United States because it's been so successful and is a true public-private partnership. So I think you're absolutely right. Street sweeping is not one of those that would impact our communities at a level we just wouldn't want to see.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Alarcon. We'll wait on Mr. Alarcon. Mr. Labange, while waiting.
To follow up on what Bill was just saying there about your Slurry Seal. We're fortunate, Mr. CEO, and I'm saying it so you know that we have developed our own plants, which puts us in a great position. And I believe we're very close to work with another municipality, Burbank, to repave Clybourne, which is the city limit sign is down the middle, and it's a patchwork type. And Crew 252, the Valley crew, will do that from the State Route 134 all the way to the end of the city limit, which makes sense. And we should look at that aspect to other needs, at least to bid. Now, I remember years ago there was a mayor in Baltimore or something. He may be the governor now, O'Malley, and he came up with this where city forces could bid on jobs and even bid on jobs outside the street, so to speak. Have you seen that in your studies as a administrator? Or can we look at that to see if there's good things? I think Mr. Smith spoke about that. When we're good, we're great, and that's the truth. We're absolutely, when the city is good, we're great, but it's a competitive world. I interrupted you.
No, I think that's something that we need to start exploring. You know, certainly the county contracts out its services to the surrounding cities, and everything from code enforcement to animal services to public works services. So that's as we start thinking about what kind of future we want to have, how do we want to be, what is it that we want to be as a city, it's important also to clarify, though, that the charter prohibits the city from generating a profit. That we are required that whatever we charge another municipality, we only recover our own cost. And so one of the challenges behind that is that we want to avoid being in a situation where we're being paid for, let's say, the city of Beverly Hills to pave their streets, and then create a scenario where we can't afford to pave our own. So that's part of the other side of it, because since we can't generate a profit, we could only charge them the actual cost of doing the job. We have to sort of balance that as a need. But ultimately, I think there's no reason why the city of Los Angeles couldn't give the county of Los Angeles some competition among the services that we provide.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Alarcon.
You know what, actually, the question's covered most of what I want to say. Street sweeping is the kind of service that people notice right away if it's not there. Now, is the department moving forward with reducing services for the monthly, for the non-posted, to some 12-week cycle versus 4-week cycle?
Not at this time, Councilman, but it's something that right now we're able to maintain the status quo because we haven't gone through the full EREP, where we're going to lose approximately 15 motor sweeper operators. What we will be doing over the next several weeks, we will be working with the council offices to identify those areas where we may see a frequency extension and making sure that we're all on the same page as what may be critical for the community's needs. Again, we're going to have to juggle those resources, and we're going to have to put the resources where the actual needs are. So we will be working with each one of the council offices to identify those areas that will see a frequency slip.
Now, if we reduce the frequency, we also have to. Well, on the posted would continue.
Yes,
at the pace.
That's the priority because that's the revenue generator.
But that means all the other communities that aren't posted there's a lesser priority for those communities that aren't posted. It seems to me they need more sweeping than the other areas. They get sweeping every week.
No, the sweeping, the way it's allocated in the city of Los Angeles, is based on actual need. Those streets that are posted generate the heaviest debris. So that's why they're swept weekly. That's why we post the signs and people are actually cited when they obstruct the sweeper.
But when you go from 4 weeks to 12 weeks...
Well, again, as I mentioned to Mr. Smith, it's not going to be an across-the-board cut. We're going to look at the actual need. We'll look at the resources. And some, yes, and certainly I know areas in the city where we could go every 12 weeks and no harm. Certainly, I know other areas
like
that we're going to have to stay at the 4 week.
Okay, we'll be watching. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move to we have cards on number 2 before Dr. Clyde Williams is our first speaker, and then Charles Leone will follow.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA. Street sweeping doesn't sound like very much, but public-private partnerships have done it in many cities because usually the city can't collect the fees to do it themselves. Why are we here, by the way? This is just the small potatoes. It's important potatoes. Maybe the whole public works should be considered for public-private partnership and remove a lot of the pensions and a lot of the other elements from the future budgets. The street sweeping. I think there used to be a concept of shared sacrifice. Shared sacrifice. The people in the private sector have already sacrificed. Just look at your
retail taxes. That's layoffs. That's real layoffs. And what's happening here in the city? I noticed how many labor organizations there are within the city government. Wow. Management has theirs, everybody has theirs. So street sweeping, yeah, it should be privatized, along with street services, along with Bureau of Sanitation. Many have been privatized already. So you have a lot of resources. However, after we get rid of these and balance this year's budget, what happens next year and the year after and the year after? Yes, we're having to sacrifice. My estimate is that each parcel within the city of Los Angeles needs to have an extra $1,000 per parcel per year for the next 4 or more years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Charles Leone is our next speaker. Then Wayne Spindler will follow.
Good afternoon, Council President and honorable members of the City Council. Charles Leone, proud union rep for SCIU 721, representing the Bureau of Street Services. I'm here today just to echo the sentiments that have existed here as part of this public dialogue, that when it comes to street sweeping, the work that we do with the Department of Public Works and the work that we do with street sweeping cannot be done better by a private contractor, that our members, that city employees, that are able to maneuver and handle the state-of-the-art equipment that the Bureau of Street Services has to perform this vital function in your council district. This function that you know is responsive, this function that you know is effective, this function that's a part of this Bureau that responds to constituents, whether you're in CD3 or you're in CD11. This is a Bureau that cares about the services it provides to the city of Los Angeles. And when it comes to street sweeping, you're talking about vehicles, folks, that cost upwards to $300,000. You're talking about state-of-the-art technology, especially the work that's taking place with the Bureau of Street Services that embodies the work that we're trying to do utilizing the green economy, the green technology. That's the work that's taking place in the Bureau of Street Services. That's the work that a private contractor would not understand. That's the type of accountability that a private contractor would not be able to give to you as stewards of public dollars and public money. That is the work that's taking place with the Bureau of street sweeping within the Bureau of Street Services. These members that we have, these proud members, these proud city employees that do this work of street sweeping, they have training that they have to do, motor sweeper training. It is absolute finite technology and absolute finite training that they need to have in order to do this important function. With that, I just want to let you know, I also support the CAO's recommendation to streamline services, to have the citing capabilities that he recommended in his report, to have that underneath the Bureau of Street Services so that we could streamline some of these services and have a bureau be responsible for it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and your comments. Wayne Spindler is next, and then in Van Nuys, Richard Sereno will follow.
Yeah, particularly in CD5, there's a number of houses that don't have sidewalks in front of them. We just had a lot of bad windstorms. You know how much it costs the city to clean up all of that? $0. All the homeowners did it themselves, or they had their gardeners go out and do it themselves. You can get rid of all the street sweeping services. You don't need it at all. You have businesses in CD1. You could pay those people a monthly fee to clean up in front of their own places. In fact, they do it right now for nothing. In exchange, you can remove all of those signs on all of those streets where you're ticketing cars. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Stealing all of that money from businesses and homeowners. For example, just this morning, you got to move your car every week from 8 to 10 a.m. You don't move it, there they are. 5 after 8, slapping the ticket right on the front of your windshield. Here comes Howard Summers towing with the tow truck, right out of there. It's nothing but a scam. Calculate how much it costs, get rid of all of it. You don't need it. And then if you really want to be bold, privatize the sidewalks in front of residential houses. People can't park in front of their houses in some of the areas because of your multiple dwelling 8-10 people living in a house in CD3 and CD7. So privatize the streets in front. The homeowner can purchase it, have exclusive rights to park in front of it, in exchange that they will maintain the sidewalk, which you want them to pay for, and maintain the cleanliness of the street in front, and have them sign a contract for 5 years renewable. And then the city pays absolutely nothing for cleaning and maintaining sidewalks and your streets, and you don't have a budgetary problem anymore. And then you can fire all those workers. You can privatize the streets. That's the way to do it, rather than screw with this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spindler. We'll go to Van Nuys next, and Richard Sereno on item 2. Good afternoon. Oh, they're gone? Okay. We'll put that in the record as well. Let's continue this for the moment, or hold that on the table. If we can go to item 3, and Mr. Huizar on El Pueblo.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. Santana, this item here is an item that will ask your staff to look at the CAO to study with the appropriate stakeholders and report back to council within 30 days on a public-private partnership proposal for options to make El Pueblo independent and self-sustaining. Now, on the self-sustaining piece, I've been working through Budget and Finance to ensure that we alleviate the pressures put on our general fund by our subsidy of El Pueblo. Year after year, we have been subsidizing El Pueblo for their operations. Now, when I say subsidize, I mean that there's potential there for El Pueblo to be self-sufficient and not rely on the general fund for its continued operations. Working with Robert Andrade, the general manager, and others, we have been working to examine the existing leases. Those are under discussion right now. We have made no final decision, but I know that presents for us the possibility of finally making El Pueblo self-sufficient. But given that, we also recognize that there's an opportunity to make El Pueblo more dynamic. And that is, while keeping with the traditions that El Pueblo has provided, while supporting the existing merchants and the contributions they have made to El Pueblo, there's an opportunity to look at different governance structures. But let me make clear, some people have proposed the complete privatization of El Pueblo. That is something that I don't think is an option. There has to be public oversight, but at the same time, I think it's worthwhile to see what options exist for different governance models that would allow us to get to a place where we see El Pueblo to be a bit more dynamic. We know that given the uniqueness of this place, it's a historical monument. It is the birthplace of the city of Los Angeles. We should certainly never look at anything that will surrender the public's oversight over this treasure. But at the same time, I think we should look at different governance models and see what that presents. And I'll leave it at that for now. I know that your motion also says that we should work with stakeholders. I would ask that you certainly work with the existing merchants, since they live there day in and day out, and they are the ones who make this a viable place, that you include them in the definition of stakeholder, and also work with our office as well. So with that, I'll leave it up to you, Mr. Santana, if you have any comments on this item as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I think you did a great job in summarizing sort of what we're recommending. And again, what we're recommending is an opportunity to sort of look at other ways of managing one of the greatest assets that our city has. El Pueblo is known internationally, and it's certainly the character and the history of El Pueblo that makes it unique. I agree with you that the worst thing we could do is privatize it like a mall, where we would bring in elements to the street that would not add to the character and the flavor of Alvera Street. But I think, given our current situation, there's potential here to explore other options, not only to make it self-sufficient, as you indicated, because we're on our way to doing that, but also to make it stronger, in some ways empower those whose lives have been part of El Pueblo for generations to take a greater role in the management of the facility and to enhance the overall experience. So this is one that, while there's certainly the goal is to identify general fund savings, it also provides even a greater opportunity to make it a more vibrant place and a place that more folks will come to visit and appreciate.
Mr. Reyes?
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to reemphasize a couple of points. One is my district sits right across the street, but in this case, I really believe that this is a moment in time in which we should do everything possible to avoid displacing the historic fabric of this facility, like it's been said. You hear rumors out there that, well, what they're really going to do is jack up the rent so high that they're going to push out folks that is the heart and soul of Olvera Street. And I don't think that's what we're trying to do.
That's correct.
If anything, with these models, we can look at different options and how we create the type of opportunities where, in a point of crisis, efficiencies can come about. Those who might have had disagreements in the past are willing to speak to each other now. That there are a level of fluidity that can add to these efficiencies that perhaps in the past did not exist. And if anyone knows the history of Olvera Street, it has not always been the smoothest road. So looking at these issues, we would hope that we can reach those efficiencies, but also create those protections for those families that have been there for decades. And I just want to add that perspective as well. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Koretz is next.
Well, this is far from my area, and I'm a little hesitant to stick my nose in and make a comment, but I'm a little fearful if we try to make this area too self-sufficient that we really lose what it's all about. I mean, I look at some of these businesses, and you wonder how they keep going, even under the current circumstances, much less with a substantially higher rent. And I know people said in articles things like having a quaint little village in these modern times is difficult to sustain. And I recognize that we're short on funds in every possible corner of the city, but at the same time, to make this city continue to be what it is in a positive way, I don't think we can always require that every single piece and every corner has to be self-sustaining and pay its full freight. I think sometimes we have to look at our history as well and try to support it. So just a thought, I'd hate to come back there 5 years from now and see it looking like a spot on the west side with a Starbucks and a Coffee Bean and a bunch of other chains instead of the things that make it as unique and wonderful as it is.
Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know what I like, and I think one of the things that's confusing to me, and I think others, is that there's a lot of history that got us where we are, and there's a lot of interpretation of the city's ordinances and administrative code. Who's best able to walk us through some of the history of how we got here, and what are the real important points in the ordinance that talks about negotiations, length of contracts, relationships with existing businesses? So it's clearly on the table what we're dealing with as we're moving forward on the economic issues.
Robert Andrade, General Manager for El Pueblo. I would also probably defer to City Attorney Peter Echeverria, who also helped put together the ordinance establishing... Sorry. Is that better? Robert Andrade, General... Okay, sir.
Don't worry about me, don't worry about me.
I don't worry about anything anymore. Thank you. City Attorney Echevarria can help you provide some information, at least from the legal standpoint, in establishing the department's ordinance. I know that the history of El Pueblo, we can go back all the way to 1932 if we want, establishing it as a romanticized Mexican marketplace by then Christine Sterling, as well as our friends with the LA Times. But we can fast forward this a little bit. The relationship between the city and the monument, if you will, is one in which eventually became a city department. Prior to that, it was operated under a JPA in which the county, I believe the state and the city were involved. For a period of time, it operated in that arena, if you will, or in that sort of arrangement. There were a number of problems as a result of that, especially with respect to making policy decisions and the impact of what was going to happen on the street and El Pueblo. By way also of background, we have 27 historic buildings. We are part of the National Register of Historic Sites. And as a result of that, we are obligated to follow the state's general plan, which dictates to us, obligates us to protect and to preserve those buildings as well as the area. And so there's an overlay of that simply dictates to us what it is that we can and cannot do. With respect to our relationship with the businesses there, we know that there are approximately 78 businesses, of which 61 are currently on a month-to-month concession agreement. The others have long-term agreements. This esteemed body directed me 2 years ago to begin moving forward towards negotiating leases. Subsequent to that, we worked with the mayor's office and had a third-party evaluation done with respect to the rents. All of you received a letter from my office late January informing you of what those market rate rents are. We're obligated to charge market rate rents. We're obligated to do that. My interests are the interests of the city. That's what I was hired to do. Should other people decide that they want to make a policy decision differing from that, that certainly is within your purview and prerogative. But when the city controller came to me and said, you need to start charging market rate rents, I took that very, very seriously. We broached that subject with the mayor's office. We laid out how those rents study was done. He concurred with us, and he asked me to go ahead and move forward. We took that to our commission. 2 weeks later, that commission also agreed with us unanimously and said, go forward and get these rents. How that relates to where we are today. All of you, and I don't need to tell you that you have a tremendous task before you. It's daunting. We're all part of a larger issue here in trying to make this city function well and to be able to cover all our obligations. And I admire you for your tenacity in moving forward towards that end. What I can provide you with are answers to a very simple problem. Our obligation for the city, our general fund obligation is $800,000 a year. There's an additional, if you look at general services portion, which is another $2.2 million, we cover that as well. With the institution of the new rents, we will cover El Pueblo's general fund obligation, we will cover our related costs, we will cover general services department related costs, direct costs, and approximately 25% of their related costs. With these new rents, we are approximately $400,000 away from being an independent, or I should say a self-sustaining department. And so then the question becomes, if we are a self-sustaining department, why would we contemplate, why would we consider handing over a city asset that is fully funded? I think that is a question one has to ask oneself. If we were here in Paris and somebody was wanting to hand over the Eiffel Tower, and it was self-sustaining, would the mayor or would the council of Paris contemplate that? I suggest to you that they would not. And I suggest that once we cover our costs, that we are allowed to move in that direction. And become self-sustaining. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Let me ask, you mentioned the reason you mentioned about the rents being market rate, because the ordinances are silent on that aspect of it, right?
I believe
it does
so.
not direct you that you must have rent at a certain level.
Correct. I believe the state plan has asked at one time, when it was part of the JPA, that the JPA was obligated to charge market rate rents. And that came forward at one time in 1997, and the commission adopted those recommendations to move forward. It just never took place.
Okay. But one of the things in the city's ordinance, it does give an indication that there should not be an arbitrary issue about length of contract, and also it gives an indication that there should be some effort to maintain the current environment, and also, it appears, even a working relationship with the existing vendors.
That is correct. I believe it was Proposition H that was approved by this body that indicated that we were obligated to negotiate long-term leases with those existing merchants back in 1997.
Okay. Before I sit down, you mentioned the issue of the raise in the market rate for leases. What other revenue sources do you have on the table that helps you also think about becoming self-sufficient?
We have a number of, and as I mentioned to you before, we took the rates, the parking rates, in December. We worked with General Services Department, and so the rates for parking have been increased, and they're comparable rates to the surrounding area. We've let out several RFPs for current vacant buildings, including the Hamill building. This is a historic building in which we could bring in approximately estimated $72,000 on an annualized basis. We're looking at ATMs. Currently, our administrative offices are looking at negotiating with banks to bring in ATMs for visitors and patrons. The one thing we want to be cautious about that is we don't want to gouge the public. So one of the restrictions that we want to put on that is that their fees would be comparable to fees that we have here locally as well in the surrounding area. We're looking at expanding events. For instance, we have over 100 events annually. And there are some events that come forward that are jointly sponsored with community groups. There are other events, Cinco de Mayo, Fiestas Patrias, City's Birthday, in which we are looking to create revenue streams for that. We have so with the Mexican Independence Day, which generates approximately $25,000 a year for us. Just by way of information as well, we had 6 temporary puestos out in the middle of the plaza right now. Those rates that are coming in are substantially higher than what is currently being charged on Olvera Street. We have one merchant who's paying $2,000 for one of those puestos. By comparison, right now you might find the average rent on center puestos on Olvera Street at $300. The other point that, again, I want to make, and I want to be absolutely clear, is that we can cover our general fund obligation and its related costs. And in doing so, we can only do that with a minimally staffed department. The CAO has decided, with part of their 1,000 reduction positions, that we would be obligated to give up 10 positions. We started a year ago with 21 positions. We are now down to 16. And what's being proposed, or what was proposed in the FSR, is a reduction of 10 more positions. That's a 71% reduction in staffing. I cannot, in all honesty, I cannot function, I cannot operate a department with 6 positions. The proposed action would prevent us from meeting our fiduciary responsibility to collect rents, to contract out for special events, for filming, which generates approximately $300,000 a year. We would not be able to meet our cultural and educational mission. Our museums would close down. Art exhibits would cease. Free events to the public would no longer be available, and we would not be able to maintain a clean, safe, family-oriented historic treasure. We just would not be able to do that with 6 staff.
Thank you, Ms. Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Santana, in sharp contrast to El Pueblo, we also have the LA Mall, which has also a long and storied history, not romanticized, but underutilized and undermarketed, under everything. It has never realized its potential, and we've never been able to keep up with it. I can remember one year when it took us probably more than a year to get the escalator repaired. We didn't have the funds, and it wasn't a priority, and to me, that situation screams out for issuance either of an RFP or to sell it or to co-lease or something. Can you just tell me, at least superficially, I know you don't have a report on it or anything, what's the potential for what we can do there?
Well, I think as you pointed out, what we don't want to see in Alvaro Street, where we have a Starbucks and a corner bakery. I think the LA Mall is a place where I would certainly like to see a Starbucks and a corner bakery. I think there's a potential there. We frankly haven't looked at it, so I couldn't tell you the specifics about how much money we're probably losing on that particular asset. But I would certainly support any motion to explore the possibility of maximizing that asset and to bring about better amenities to the Civic Center.
Okay, and then CLA's done that in the past before. Obviously, I'll bring that up. Resuscitate motions that may or may not have been acted on, but I think this presents us with a rare opportunity, with a clear example of why the city, maybe in this case, should not be in the business of operating this mall, this particular mall, the Los Angeles Mall, and using it as an opportunity to gain some ground here.
Thank you very much, Ms. Perry. Mr. Alarcon?
How much sales tax revenue do we get from Alvaro Street?
I don't know how we capture that. Do we capture it?
I know that this room settled with the CEO's office, and it has been very difficult to get any kind of sales information from merchants, so they would be responsible for paying sales taxes to the state.
Do we have any kind of assessment, any kind of guess?
No.
Well, we can agree, because every time I go there, the stores are busy. They're selling stuff. And I have to assume they're charging sales tax on that stuff. In fact, I know they are because I paid sales tax. So one of the things that concerns me about Alvaro Street is we're always talking about we subsidize them. When I know that we are getting a heck of a lot more in sales tax revenue than $800,000 out of Cayo Verde. There's no question about it. So we're not subsidizing Alvaro Street. And what concerns me, if we take this thing too far, we move away from exactly those things that are attracting the dollars there, then we'll diminish those dollars and we'll lose revenue. The model works. $800,000 is less than what we get in sales tax from the sales at Alvaro Street. So we need to maintain it. The question of how we operate it, so for one thing, if you can't tell me how much sales tax, then you can't tell me what market rate is. Because if you're an owner of a building and you're renting out to a business, you're not getting their sales tax. If you were getting their sales tax, you would reduce the rent. I guarantee it. So what I'm saying is, you shouldn't be charging market rate, because we are getting a kickback in the form of sales tax to come to the city of Los Angeles. We're getting subsidized by the merchants at Cayo Vera. So we should not have a problem with that. Now, I have to tell you, I also think that historically, this is one of the most difficult situations that the city has had in terms of trying to manage it politically, socially, maintaining the cultural elements. I know Olvera Street doesn't look like the original Olvera Street. I know that. But which ones, in the one sense, we want to maintain the centuries-old history of the location. On the other hand, we have to recognize the 50-year culture that has been established. The families that have managed that place have become part of the culture of the street and have to be recognized. And I believe that will hold up in cultural heritage law. So, and maybe not, but in any case, it should be considered. But I also think that if we can get ourselves away from this notion that we're subsidizing the street and understand that we in fact are generating revenue from the street, then it's not an issue of musical chairs on how it's being managed as much as are we maximizing the opportunity to manage it effectively. And so I don't have a problem with the working group, but I also want us to ensure that we focus on the integrity of Olvera Street, that we make it what it should be. I was baptized across the street, so I have a particular affinity to it. Me and about 2 million other Mexicans from Los Angeles, and others, 3 or 4 others at least. But and so there is an affinity to it in all kinds of different ways. But I hope that we whatever we do, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, that we maintain the historical aspects, the cultural aspects, the integrity of the process, but let's not lose sight. We are making money off of this street. We're not subsidizing it.
Thank you, Mr. Alarcon. Mr. LaBonge.
Councilman, you make very good points, and it is not the intention of the department to sacrifice any of the cultural integrity of the street. We recognize that is a key element as part of Los Angeles' history. And for that reason, we're working with other departments, including Community Development Department, to bring in additional resources for business plans, for potential tax reductions, DWP, a 35% reduction in water rates, electricity rates, that we bringing to the table to share with the business owners on Olvera Street so that they can take advantage of all the resources that are available to them. The issue of market rates, it really is, how do you define it? We had a study done. We had 2 studies done. The second study reduced it even further and gave us a range. What we proposed is the low end of that range because we know that the product line, oftentimes, especially for some of the smaller ones, smaller puestos, is difficult, and it's going to be a challenge. But we're offering our services and the services of all the city to the extent that we can help them make their responsibilities. But fundamentally, when we go out to RFP and when there's nobody from the street but somebody from the outside coming and offering to pay, what we're finding out is that even what we're proposing to, what we're charging now, or what will be in effect April 1st, is lower than what the market is willing to pay. So.
Mr. LaBonge.
Thank you very much. Would it be safe to say, Mr. CEO, that our historic site, our beloved historic site, is an underperforming asset?
Well, I think that's to the eye of the beholder. I mean, I think there's certainly.
When's the last time you ate there?
Last week.
Last week? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I think the goal here, I think, Councilman Alarcon, I think said it best, that it's not really about the dollars and cents here. And certainly I think there's a plan, the city's already embarked on a plan to reduce the general fund contribution to maintain Alvera Street. But it's really about, I don't think there's anything wrong in asking the question, is there a better way of doing this? Is there a better way of preserving the history, maintaining the culture, and honoring what makes Alvera Street unique? That could be done not necessarily with the existing model that we have today. The answer could be no, there isn't. We may find out as we explore this that we've identified the best model, and the question is, how do we strengthen that model given our fiscal situation? But I think what we're proposing here is that we allow ourselves to explore that question and come back to you with our best thinking about how we could enhance the overall experience and really create Alvera Street and maximize it, not just as an asset, but more importantly, as one of the most important sites in Los Angeles.
Right, I support you on that, so I want that done. At the same time, I want everybody to know there's transformation that comes with that. And at the same time, I think we have to look to the future and make sure there's a value of the experience for the historic experience. I had an opportunity to work with Ms. Perry and Mr. Weezar, although it wasn't as successful, to bring the Starline tours down there, which tried to generate people, which I think the street appreciated. That time will come again. The market wasn't there at the moment. But I think on looking at all our assets there, and the Pico Garnet complex there has to be a bike facility there to rent bikes. People take the Metrolink train on weekends into Los Angeles. They will discover the city by bicycle, and I look for some avenue to try to accelerate that, because in cities around the country, they rent bikes at their historic centers so that people could experience the city on their own, whether it's on foot or on a bike. But also the other thing, and I believe, and I will give credit, Nick Patsoris was the first to mention this, the former commissioner, that there should be some storefronts above the 101 freeway, a mini cap park, if you will, to continue the connection. And Ms. Perry was so right in discussing the issues of the mall and trying to enhance or connect that. There's a lot of asset there that has to be connected, whether it's parking, to make people come and have an enjoyment. I don't think, I've been to Notre Dame, both in South Bend, Indiana, and in Paris, and there's an experience there that you get. There needs to be an experience there up the street that gets it a little bit more, so we need to work in that direction. But at the same time, I believe the market has to come up, and I appreciate families, but all families have to know that you have to keep investing. Rent's got to be what they are today, what they should be, or what you have with some. How many have what we would call market rates today on this day?
Actually, the study did show approximately 6 existing merchants are already paying market rate. So we would be looking at... 6 out of how many? Out of maybe 70. 70. So that's, if I got 6 questions right out of 70, I would have got kicked out of Marshall High, And so I want to make sure we increase the 6. And be fair to people, everybody, but at the same time be real to people. And also I want to say this too. Not far from there in 1926, somebody came from Kansas. They ended up at Vermont and Kingswell. They had a studio on Hyperion. They later went to Burbank because they couldn't get their land, and they built a place called Disneyland, which is called the greatest place on earth. That could be one of the greatest places on earth up the street here, because the power of the great influences that built this city from the Mission days and from all who've come here. But we have to give it a go, we have to give it a focus, and we have to bring it up, and we have to
make sure everybody is real who is there, in the sense of coming up with commitments to house the building, to bring life to the street. And the last thing I will say, I had the honor of working for Mayor Reardon at the time. I had the honor to liaison to El Pueblo, and I also thought some of the kioscos in the center of the street, if they were removed, you could see the historic buildings much better than you can. And I think that's real important to look at the historic buildings that are there and connected to Union Station. I thank you and wish you luck and pledge cooperation. And the committee that chairs this, Arts, Parks, Health, and Aging, at a future date will have a hearing in the Pico House to discuss these issues with Mr. Huizar.
Thank you. Mr. Huizar is our next speaker.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Alarcon, I think you're right. Subsidy is not the right word, but I think what we're looking for is to find a way where, since I was a commissioner there under the Reardon days, the merchants and the stakeholders have often talked about how do we market this place better to support not only the merchants but the sales tax base of the city. How do we get enough funds to immediately go out and do maintenance, et cetera? So subsidy is probably not the right word, but how do we better operate ourselves? And one of the questions I had for Mr. Andrade is, although without already deciding what the new leases are, the fact of the matter is that we have to come up with some lease, because a lot of the tenants at the El Pueblo have been functioning on month to month. I speak to merchants, I speak to other tenants. Everyone wants tenants. Everybody wants the leases, because they want security, the city wants a sense of stability, so we need the leases. We did ask you to come back to us to Budget and Finance September to execute leases. We didn't see that. Then we said end of December. We didn't see that. Then we said, okay, February 14th. That's a couple of days from now. Will we have executed leases by February 14th?
You will not have executed leases February 14th. What you will have is a report by my office that will give you a status on how many people we've met with, how many people have agreed in concept with the terms that we've proposed, and what needs to remain. So in the final analysis, what will take place from a process standpoint is that we will come forward to you, to this body, and to Budget and Finance with a master agreement. That master agreement will be consistent for all those business owners who have signed. We have had some who have already inked, if you will, in concept, the agreement to those terms. So we're well on our way to do that. Others have chose not to ink yet. We're following up a little bit with some questions that they may have. But that process is moving forward. And we expect to come forward to this body in April with whomever has signed with a master agreement. We will come forward. If it's 10 people, if it's one, if it's all 61, we will come forward with those
So the new date is April. The new date that you're giving us is April?
I think ultimately part of it is business owners need time to think about those terms. Some have. And have agreed to them. Others are still contemplating, and still others have yet to meet with us. But if by way of a commercial, all they have to do is call our office, set up an appointment, and we're more than happy to sit down with business owners to do that.
Because what we're looking for and what I'm looking for is just a realistic date by which that could be done. And so now you're saying April.
Well, my discussions with the mayor's office has said we will come forward in April with those people who have signed and report to this body. Those who choose not to sign will remain on concession agreements, and then we will move forward from that point forward.
Okay.
But it's also important to understand that part of what we wanted to do with the leases is to bifurcate, if you will, the rents. We've discussed this a little bit right now. The rents, and we talked with the city attorney about this. We certainly wouldn't have gone forward unless the city attorney and the mayor had approved it. So those rents, the dollars, that revenue stream will be coming in, regardless as to whether we have leases or not.
Okay, now you also mentioned that there are 10 proposed layoffs from El Pueblo. If we execute leases and you're saying we're going to be self-sufficient for next fiscal year, wouldn't then we have sufficient funds to save those 10 positions?
Yes, we would.
Okay, so earlier you said you're just letting us know that you cannot do without these 10 leases, without these 10 positions, but if we execute leases, we'll be self-sufficient, and so therefore we'll have sufficient funding for the 10 positions.
Just a small point of clarification. It's the rents that come in April 1st. whether we have leases or not. That revenue stream will cover El Pueblo's direct and indirect costs, and it will cover the $2.2 million of general services direct costs. It does not cover approximately $400,000 in general services indirect costs. But we've been working with them because part of, and I understand, I worked with the CAO's office before, and I understand the related cost piece. But what I'm saying is out of a $5.2 million budget, both direct and indirect, $5.3 million budget, direct and indirect, that we will be $300,000 short out of $5.3 million. Allow me to move forward, to work closely with General Services to look at how we might be able to reduce the cost, because that's the other end of the equation. We could begin to look at ways of improving cost efficiencies, reducing costs on the general funds, on the General Services side, which would then reduce our obligation on the related cost side. Okay. But $300,000, $400,000 away. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Okay. But I can tell you that if I'm going to be negotiating leases, if I'm going to be having events, if I'm going to be collecting money from parking, I need to have those 10 people, or those 10 plus the 6 I have. At 6, I'm looking at myself, one accountant, one administrator, and 2 people in property management. All events will cease. All exhibits will go away. All museums will close down. We talk about the importance of this site. We clearly know that it is. Our friends in the audience clearly know that it is. But without those positions, we can't operate. We just cannot operate.
Okay. And I think the idea that we're discussing here is that El Pueblo shouldn't be relying on the general fund for the city that continues to get smaller and smaller and smaller. We need to create a model whereby we shouldn't be concerned whether the general fund can or cannot support you. I mean, subsidy is not the right word, but I believe, and I think various studies have shown that with the right type of operation, keeping intact the history, tradition, supporting the existing merchants and the quaintness of El Pueblo, we can still be at a position where we could properly market and maintain El Pueblo without having to be at the direction of the shrinking general fund for the city. So although you're right, we could be self-sufficient, the idea is to find a way where we support more tourism, more people walking El Pueblo with the existing type of environment that exists, and I do believe we could probably get there, but it's worth looking at it. We're not making those decisions now, but it's worth looking at. What we do have to do now, Mr. Andrade, is get those leases done. We've had 3 extensions. We cannot no longer afford to have any more extensions. We need them done. We haven't decided what that rate will be, but we have to do it in a way that supports our merchants and allow them to continue to be there. But at the same time, we need an answer on both sides. Stability for the city, security for the merchants. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We have 2 more speakers in the queue. We're trying to stay on our timeline. We have a significant stack of cards, public speakers. So I'll call on Mr. Parks and Mr. Reyes for the second time, and then I'll go to the cards.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me ask Miguel, on the conversation we just had earlier, if the department is successful in securing funds to become self-sufficient, does that then, for this year and next year, as far as your calculation, remove those positions from being considered for cuts, even if they reach their financial goal?
Again, it's sort of similar to the conversation we had with the city attorney. It's the positions recommended for elimination is not a direct consequence of each department's budget. We have a citywide problem, and that problem this fiscal year is being generated. It comes out of a handful of departments, and so as a way of addressing it, we have to spread it across citywide. And so I think that's. I appreciate that opportunity to clarify that point. That I mean, for example, my own office is experiencing the elimination of 5 positions. And so the correlation between our budget and those 5 is not necessarily there.
Okay. But also in Budget Committee, when we asked you to look at the entire budget versus 30%, does it give any reprieve as it relates to this department?
Well, certainly, to the extent that we're able to tap into the portion of the budget, which is, as you indicated, 70% of the general fund, that currently has a firewall around it, then obviously it would have a benefit to the rest of the city family.
So some of these recommendations you're making would be changed if you had a wider scope of looking at the entire budget?
We certainly would be approaching it differently, and as we proceed next year, as long as there's a prohibition against addressing certain parts of the city, then obviously the rest of the city family has to bear that burden.
Okay. And then, Mr. Andrade, you have the historical perspective. What happened to the city's efforts to provide the parking lot, which would have created even more revenue?
I know that issue went to the CLA's office and Council District 14, but not the current councilman. There was a lot of discussion from a capital standpoint. That's really not my area of understanding.
Did you say there were some issues? It was cost, and there were some issues about the historical aspect of the area.
Correct, sir. There clearly were cost issues, and any building that takes place, any construction renovation that takes place, and I want to correct everybody. It's not Olvera Street. It's El Pueblo Historic Monument. 22 acres of historic buildings, as well as Olvera Street, which is very important to us. But it's a historic monument. Any digging, any retrofitting, any construction that takes place, we have to have a historic architect on site. So any building that's going to take place could affect that. Yeah.
Okay. Let me just show you 2 things in my last few seconds. There's 2 things I'd like you to concentrate on, because although I think you mentioned that there are several small friends of groups for different particular buildings, I would hope that in looking to the future, we could put a very strong friends of, like we have the zoo, and we have a variety of other things in the city that would assist in the fundraising and such that keeps you afloat, and also with the positions. The other thing that I think is important, and certainly I think in reading over and over that administrative code, it's silent on the issue of maintaining rents. They talk about basically moving forward on maintaining the relationships and things of that nature. But I would hope that we consider, and the city attorney would have to be the guide on this, that as we move forward, that if we're going to look somebody in the eye and say, we're going to triple your rent, it should be over a period of time. The goal might be to get to market rate, but I think any one of us sitting on the weekend doing our family bills, if any one of them came in 3 times more than we'd expect, we'd have to make some adjustment for that. And I think these are the issues I think are important, that the goal I don't think is objectionable, but how we get to it, and that we not impair people unnecessarily while we get there. We may end up with the same amount of money over a longer period of time, but do we then ask for it by April and it's a drop dead date? That would be something I'd hope, and it may impact Mr. Santana because it's less money coming in over a shorter period. But the issue is, I think it would be a fairness situation, and again, we won't even get into the 12 versus the 60, but the issue of how do you get the 60 online and how do you do it in an incremental manner that you're not creating harm to an existing business.
I understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
Certainly, sir.
Mr. Reyes?
Just, excuse me, sir, just one point of clarification, and I'm going to disagree with my friend here. When we looked at the 10 positions, again, the rents coming in means that those positions are special funded. It's not general fund. So, and it's clearly an important distinction to make, because at that point, the problem that we're looking at from a general fund side, it doesn't solve that problem.
Just ask one other question. Would all the funds they generate be considered specific or special funds? the funds that go into their accounts?
Ramon Soto with the CAO's office. The funding source for El Pueblo is the El Pueblo Trust Fund. So the trust fund receives all of their revenues, including the parking, the leases, as well as a general fund subsidy.
I mean, without general fund subsidy, or would all the rest of the funds be considered special funds? Because it's in the with the foundation of it.
It would be considered special funds, except for the part of the budget in the fund, which is the general fund subsidy itself.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Madam President. And I kind of touched this touched on this issue with Councilman Huizar, but historically, and maybe the stars are lining up here, but the county owns a lot of land right across the street. There's islands of asphalt, probably about proportionate to the amount of buildings there is, if you had a mirror image. Has there ever been a discussion with county personnel about looking at being opportunistic with that space and creating something better that will enhance revenues and create a landmark for the county in as much as benefit the city? Has there ever been that type of discussion?
I've not been party to those conversations, sir.
I hate to put you on the spot, Mr. Santana.
I haven't had those conversations within my capacity as CAO of the city. I'm obviously very familiar with what's happening on the county side. The county must have invested about $40 million in what's going to be a cultural center, La Plaza de Cultura y Arte. And I think one of the potential ways that we could start looking at is how to build a synergy between that venue and the rest of everything that's going on in El Pueblo, and as well as with La Placita. And while I wasn't baptized there, I went to church there every Sunday. But I think that that's sort of what we're wanting to explore, is how do we take advantage of not just what happens on the city side, but looking at it as a quarter within the city of Los Angeles and maximize it as a destination point for residents who live here and for those who visit.
The synergy that is potentially there when you look at the transit-oriented district that comes not only from the light rail station in Chinatown, which is 3 blocks away, but Union Station across the street. It is one of the applications we submitted a couple of years ago that folded in those properties, but it's unfortunate that we haven't been able to get traction with our county brothers and sisters in looking at this potential. And I'd be more than happy to work with my neighbor, Councilman Huizar, and seeing how these 3 elements actually complement each other while preserving that envelope of space that's historic.
Right.
So something to consider, and perhaps we can look at that in the future and speak with the supervisor to see if there's an interest to go in that direction. But it truly is an amazing opportunity cost to let just that asphalt sit there and all that tremendous airspace just sitting fallow when we could be stimulating a major revenue base. So something to think about.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Reyes. I'm going to call the speakers up in groups, and each person will be given 1 minute to speak. So I'll call up 5 or 6 people at a time. Feliz Munoz, Vivian Bonzo, Julie Sandoval, Cheryl Parisi, Dr. David Jimenez. To start. Feliz Munoz. Is Mr. Munoz here? Ms. Munoz? Is Feliz Munoz here? All right, we'll go to the next person. Vivian Bonzo is our...
I give me 5 minutes to Vivian, please. Hello.
No, we don't yield time here.
Okay.
Vivian Bonzo is our next speaker. Are you Mr. Munoz?
This is going to be in Spanish.
Hold on. Momento, por favor. Okay, all right. We have...
Adelante.
solamente que no es posible que nos cubran,
I want to let you know that it's not possible for
que nos suban tanto así la renta, porque no vamos a poder subsistir.
we won't be able to survive like that.
Y por favor pongan atención
And please pay attention
en nuestro problema.
To our problem.
Okay. Y por favor ayúdenos.
And please help us.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Vivian Bonzo.
Thank you. My grandmother was the founder of La Golondrina. We were credited with starting the Cinco de Mayo and the 16th of September in Los Angeles, and I have a very proud feeling that for 80 years our family has been able to operate it on Olvera Street. We've seen states run it, cities run it, nonprofits run it. In fact, the merchants have run it under the State Department of Recreation and Parks. There were no problems at that time. In fact, Olvera Street was thriving. It was the early days that gave Olvera Street the reputation that created a monument that was then able to bring in other museums and other cultural groups. Unfortunately, the city at this point, our department is proposing no leases for 61 merchants. Councilman Huizar, you asked when the leases would be ready. We haven't seen a lease. What we're being asked to pay is between 300% and 900% rent increases in 2 months, with a 30-day contract that assures us of absolutely nothing. And I'd like to know who in the city of Los Angeles has ever been subjected to those type of rents. I'll be back.
Thank you. Julie Sandoval.
Good afternoon, honorable council members. My name is Julie Sandoval, and I've worked for El Pueblo Monument Department for 19 years. Not by chance, but by choice. I truly love the city's birthplace and have a special cariño for Olvera Street and its merchants. I am one of a handful of dedicated veteran employees who have spent our entire city careers working for the monument in a myriad of capacities. El Pueblo is a multicultural and historical treasure in the heart of Los Angeles. It is our history. El Pueblo, like other historic sites, faces difficult challenges to its preservation and restoration, but with creative leadership in its development and full support from the city, El Pueblo could be one of the greatest historic sites in the United States, as it deserves to be. Please do not rush to judgment on its future. Do what is right for me, for you, for the merchants and the millions of visitors, young and old, who leave El Pueblo with a newfound understanding about the history of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Carol Parisi.
Thank you. El Pueblo is a marketplace, but it is also an historic monument, the birth of the city of Los Angeles. We are AFSCME, it proudly represents all of the workers, curators, workers who are the museum guides, maintain the visitor centers, and really provide the life and give life to the history of El Pueblo. We are extremely concerned with the backup on the CAO's report, which proposes the elimination of 10 positions and all of the part-time workers. The end result of this proposal, and we ask that you not embrace it, we ask that you move away from it, would be to eliminate events and marketing. It would eliminate and close all of the museums. It would close the visitor centers. There will be no monument. This is no plan. We ask that you reject this and support the monument, support the history of Los Angeles.
Dr. David Jimenez.
Good afternoon, Council President, Council members. I am a Mason. I today represent the Scottish Rite of Los Angeles. We are benevolent organizations worldwide, of course. We have 17 burn hospitals for children at no cost to children or families throughout the nation, and we support free speech and hearing evaluations and treatment within California as well through the Scottish Rite. I followed the meanderings, as it were, of the commission and the monument for the last year or so, year and a half, and it's particularly Lodge 42. We were the original tenants. We've anticipated an RFP for the last year that would help us to address the issues with that particular vacant building. We would like to come in, renovate at no cost to the city. Again, these are national treasures, And I, as a business person, understand a P&L statement. There's a qualitative piece that has been mentioned, I think, by Councilman Labange in terms of someone's experience having gone through that monument. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call up next Abelardo de la Peña Jr. Is that person here? Come on up. Marianne Gatto, are you still here? Marianne Gatto. Robert Banuelos or Banuelos? Is Robert here? Okay, come on up. Joanne Adams. Joanne Adams, are you here? Okay, great. And then Vanessa Acosta. Abelardo.
Good morning. My name is Abelardo de la Peña Jr. I'm here today as a board member and interim director of the Mexican Cultural Institute, one of several nonprofit cultural institutions housed at El Pueblo. We've been there for 20 years, the premier venue for the expression of traditional and contemporary art and culture from the Mexican, Mexican-American, and Chicano perspective. We work with other stakeholders, El Pueblo Merchants Association, Plaza Methodist Church, La Placita, and other groups in bringing programming to the entire rural community as well as the residents of the city of LA. We have great concern over the proposal to make El Pueblo independent and self-sustaining via public-private partnership. While we're not either opposed nor are we supportive. We're very aware of the precarious budgetary situation, but we just want to make sure that the nonprofits have a place at the table when it comes time to talking about this public-private partnership. So any discussion relative to this, the nonprofits must be involved as well. Thank you very much.
Marianne Gatto.
Good afternoon. My name is Marianne Gatto, and I'm Curator of History and Education for El Pueblo Historical Monument. For the past 5 years, I've had the pleasure of educating young people, visitors from around the world, about the rich history of the city of Los Angeles and making programming accessible to all. El Pueblo, as you know, is a repository of the city's history, possessing the oldest buildings in the city, many of which operate as museums. Our vast collection includes the most historic photographs of the city, as well as Sheriff Bisco Lusado, Pio Pico's personal writings. Echoing Councilman Huizar and Councilman Reyes' comments earlier, privatizing the city's birthplace, its history, and cutting 10 of the 16 positions in my department is not only short-sighted but shameful. Please preserve El Pueblo as a public space and a loving tribute of the city's history. Thank you.
Robert Banuelos.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, council members. I'm Robert Banuelos. I'm one of the museum guides over at El Pueblo. And I also have the privilege of being a resident. As a museum guide, I see people, whether it be the random weekday or the weekend. We get international visitors there. We get people coming from all over the world to visit El Pueblo, the city's birthplace. I know a couple summers ago, the city and Mayor Villaraigosa had this, initiative that's So LA to promote tourism in Los Angeles, and that's where El Pueblo sits. It shouldn't be seen as a liability or a cost to the city, but something that can attract tourism, money, which we obviously need, to the city. So before you consider laying off, 10 employees or demolishing the history department, think at what kind of impact it'll have to the tourism of Los Angeles and to the history of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Joanne Adams.
Good afternoon. My name is Joanne Adams, and I'm from Northeast Los Angeles. And thank you. Just this morning I'd heard about talks about privatization, and I would like to speak against that. I think that once, especially with our historical monuments and history, that once something like that becomes private, it loses its ties to community. And it's very important that we maintain ties with the community, keep that spirit alive, keep the spirit alive of the people who worked it, spirit of the land. And I guess that's just what I want to say, that please, I would encourage that in trying to find a way of keeping the Pueblo alive and thriving, and working with the people and coming up with a solution that may be thinking outside of the box, dare to take some risks and open up our concepts and how we can make these things continue well. Thank you.
Vanessa Acosta.
Greetings, council people. As a person involved in cultural arts and tourism, I am here to support the nonprofit cultural departments and the many merchants within the El Pueblo of Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles should continue to support the very heart and soul of its culture that has made this city. I support the CAO's report, El Pueblo's needs, people at its helm that will nurture it and promote and support the people and the history of the culture that has made this place famous. I also feel that through privatization, I fear that this will result in the watering down of the many diverse cultures that gather at El Pueblo and gives us our colors, smells, and taste that has created the ties to LA's and to the LA's eclectic community, and that El Pueblo's merchants contribute to all kinds of people that come here. This place has been one of my favorite places since a child, and I would like for it to continue to exist. Thank you.
The final group of speakers will be as follows: Bernabe Velarde, come on up; Jesus Hernandez, Augusto Godoy, Richard Hernandez Chase, and then we will close with Joseph Gatto.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Bernabe Velarde. I own the fruit stand on Olvera Street, and it really saddens my heart to see what's going on in the situation regarding the leases. There are a lot of my colleagues that have, as it is, it's no secret to Los Angeles that we are in a major economic crisis. Business on Olvera Street has gone down 40 to 50% last year, which I can prove with my numbers alone. To hike up the rents for a lot of these merchants, 400 to 900% is outrageous. I don't know anyone that has that kind of pressure. We're talking about a ripple effect that's going to affect everyone. Employees are going to lose their jobs. We already talked about tax revenue as well as property tax revenue that merchants provide for El Pueblo. I really want this body to use their wisdom and consideration when it comes to raising the rents. We understand that, a 10% raise is acceptable, but 400 to 500, that's going to hurt a lot of people.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Hernandez.
Senores, with all my respect, my name is Jesus Hernandez. I'm a merchant of Olvera Street. My family and I have been there since 1952. And all I wanted to say that with this increase of rent, I think we're giving up our history, our honor, our culture for dollars. Come on, I don't think so. Thank you.
Augusto Godoy.
Hi, Councilman. My name is Augusto Godoy. I'm Olvera Street Merchants, and I was very surprised when they give us a piece of paper telling me that I had to pay exorbitant increase in our rents. It's about 600%, 900% in our rents, especially this time. Nobody is paying this kind of rent. So we've been on Olvera Street for 4 years and working in all the fiestas and celebrations, and people know here that we are the supporters of this Olvera Street, El Pueblo de Los Angeles. So we are here to complain because this is impossible. How can we go pay this exorbitant high amount of rent? Nobody around us is paying these high rents. So thank you, and I wish you take consideration of us.
Richard Hernandez Chase.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Hernandez Chase. I operate the world famous Donkey Cart on Olvera Street, and I would like to invite all of you to come down and talk to some of the merchants. The 2 new tenants that we have that are paying from $1,200 to $2,000 this last couple of months, they cannot pay it. They're not making the sales. Okay, the rents are extremely high. Nobody on Olvera Street is going to be able to pay them. We're all going to lose. Second, the events
the fiestas, all the celebrations that have been going on to Olvera Street were there long before we have this top-heavy management. We don't need them. They're pulling the wool over your eyes. And think about it, April 1st, that's April Fool's. Think about what's going on. Really, I mean, look more into this. Consider the CAO proposal. The merchants are for it. Please look closely to what's going on. Thank you for your time.
Joseph Gatto, and we also have Commissioner Louie, Commissioner Louie will close, so if you can come on up.
Thank you. The arts contribute in excess of $9 billion to the economy and the tax base of the state of California. Our sister city, Ischia, in Italy, is part of an economy that at one time was 7th best in the world. Even though Italy imports all of its natural resources, it considers its greatest resource its people. Italy achieved its economic status through tourism and tourism and design. California just recently replaced Italy with a stronger economy and generates much of its income through tourism and art and design. The proposal to privatize historical El Pueblo does little to maintain the culture and heritage and traditions of this great city and does not advance the interests of our greatest resource, its citizens. Privatization does not ensure that the tax base and the economy will stabilize, and there's even a probability that the monies will leave the state for other states that have a lower tax base for corporations.
Commissioner Louie.
Good afternoon. My name is David Louie. I'm a commissioner with the El Pueblo de Los Angeles Monument. In listening to the discussion, there's much talk about the possible mismanagement or looking at a better management model. And I would suggest to you that the problem that we have at El Pueblo actually starts at this level. And that is that we get mixed messages. On one hand, we want to support the merchants with lower than market rates. On the other hand, we want to be able to be break even. I think the general manager and the city employees, starting right at the top to the most recent intern, are fully capable of executing whatever plan you want to have. If you want to be balanced, if you want to show a surplus, we are capable of doing that. If you want to subsidize, that's possible. The subsidy over the last quarter century amounts to $37.5 million, monies that could have been used to support other areas in the El Pueblo. On a go-forward basis, that subsidy is $110 million.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, with that, yes?
I just want a point of clarification for everyone to understand. What's before us is a CAO report to look at governance models. What's not before us is the 10 positions that were proposed to be laid off. So that's not before us. But certainly, and what's not before us as well is the rents. So the only thing is to look at different governance models. But quickly, I know, as you've heard through a majority of the council here, privatization is not an option. There are just different governance models. And secondly, the issues of the rents will come soon. I know I have a meeting with all the merchants this coming Friday, so we could discuss that and many other issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, what is the action we can take on this item other than...
Council can adopt the recommendation to look at various governance models as Mr. Huizar mentioned.
Okay, great. Let's open the roll on the item as described on the agenda. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Great. Mr. Garcetti.
With the other ones that are left, I would move that we go straight to public comment for folks that have been waiting, so that we take up public comment on items 4, 5, and 6 together, and then we can move forward the studies. Obviously, these things are going to come back to us, so it's the option of us being able to hear what some of that information is. I think, except for with the exception of the moratorium, which is item 4 or 5, on I think 5, if folks want to discuss that one, but otherwise we could move back so we can have the reports and do the work that we're supposed to in between instead of duplicating that here.
Why don't we do that? I will go through the cards, 1 minute each per person, and we'll start with item 4 and go straight through to item 6, and I'll call them up in groups. First group will be Dr. Clyde Williams, Mr. Simboa Wright, Wayne Spindler. Is Wayne Spindler still here? Wayne Spindler? Come on up, Wayne. Andy Morales. Those are all the cards on item 4. So, Dr. Williams, you're our first speaker. 1 minute each.
For all 4, 5, and 6. Okay. Clyde Williams, El Sereno, Northeast LA. We've heard a lot about sacrifices that are being done right now, whereas where's the LA Fire Department? Where's the LA Police Department? When will they start sacrificing, because they represent 60-70% of the budget that we're talking about, trimming here, trimming there, and franchising my houses collection. By the way, Montebello did that. They privatized the collection and it issued a recall. So be careful. I would highly recommend that you consider public-private partnerships for the LA Fire Department and to get it off of the pension. So, thank you.
Mr. Wright?
Hello, my name is Sambuya Wright. I do work for the Bureau of Sanitation. I ask you to support the franchising of the multi-family refuge collection. It's a great idea. In fact, I would hope that most general managers would come up with money-saving ideas like this that would help out the general fund to continue to help support general-funded positions within the city of LA. So I would ask you to support this, and it's a great idea. Thank you.
Mr. Spindler.
Yes, in regard to the refuse collection, I believe that gets onto everybody's DWP bill once a month. Every other month, they're up to about $35 a month for refuse collection. Let the homeowners and ratepayers that get a DWP bill opt out of getting their trash collected, and let them go ahead and have private trash service. Completely privatize it. I think that would be a good way to do it, especially given the fact that DWP keeps raising it. So take that off of the DWP bill, get the DWP out of the sanitation collection business, and then they can focus their priorities on the utility and water side of things a lot more. And I have to say, for the multifamilies, you can, within each complex, it's much more cost-effective to franchise and privatize. So that sounds like a good idea. Thank you.
Andy Morales.
Good evening, Council. My name is Andy Morales. I'm a refuse collection truck operator. I'm a chief steward for Local 721. I'm here on behalf of myself and my fellow union members. We support item number 4, franchising a multifamily refuse collection. This is a brilliant idea to bring to the general fund, to bring dollars to the general funds while still being able to maintain our current personnel to deliver public service. This is the type of ideas that will allow us to keep services and keep jobs. Just so you know, this was an idea that was discussed in our joint labor management meetings. Proof that working together through the JLMC does work. We're working through this as partners, not adversaries. If you support these services and jobs, you will support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. That marks the end of the cards on item 4. Now I'm going to the cards on item 5. That's again 1 minute each. Jason Elias and Ted Johnson. Come on up, Ted. And that should be it.
Just a question. I also have a card in for number 6. I also have a minute on that.
Don't run his clock on that. We're going to do everything together because we're going to move the items today anyway.
So I need to speak on 5 and 6?
Yeah. Start his clock again. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Just on number 5, very quickly, we actually support, on behalf of SEIU Local 721 and the Coalition, we actually support a moratorium in terms of one item, which is the golf carts, and we believe that we should actually get the department to operate those golf carts as we suggested during that item just a few months ago, where we believe the city can make $1 million a year on their own. On item number 6, in terms of privatization of the golf courses, number 1, you can't do it because you can't lay off our members, which is part of your plan, and then decide to contract out our work. Number 2, reasons to privatize are generally increasing rounds, cutting overhead, volume purchasing, improving golf course management, all those things that the department does well. What they need is a plan, a way to get their capital improvement plans together, and that we're willing to work with you on, but privatization is not the way to go for golf courses. They do a fantastic job. Thank you.
Ted Johnson.
Ms. Perry, I think I'm down for number 6. Do you want me to just go with that?
It's fine.
Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, council members, especially Mr. Krikorian, my newly elected council member. I see the city is once again considering privatization of golf courses and other properties. It's an issue that comes up every 10 to 20 years, and it's consistently voted down. The golf division staff is very capable of doing an outstanding job, but they seem to be hindered by their higher-ups, Recreation and Park, which are also hindered by City Council and the Mayor. No one denies that golf courses are real money makers, but you can't keep using the revenues received to pay for non-golf expenses. If the income is put back into the improvement of the facilities, more players would want to play there. If non-resident rates could go up, such as what's happened in San Diego and San Francisco with Harding Park and Torrey Pines. The county system was taken over by private companies in a time of better economy. And the management companies got long-term contracts that included capital improvements. I don't think a private company would enter into such an agreement today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That marks the end of our public speaker cards. Mr. Garcetti has already moved without objection items 4, 5, and 6. I believe that marks the end of our agenda for today.
Madam President, item number 2 is still before council.
Oh, it is. All right.
Being held on the desk, you had the public comment on item number 2, street sweeping.
All right, so then we will also move 2, in addition to 4, 5, and 6, from Mr. Garcetti without objection. Madam Clerk, can you open the roll on all those items? Close the roll. And tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
And what's our next order of business?
And just for clarification, Madam President, item number 1 is continued to Tuesday, and that is February 16th. And then that ends the agenda for the special meeting.
All right, so we should recess the...
actually, you can adjourn this meeting, and that will be it for today.
All right, for today. What is our next item of business?
That's it, after this is adjourned.
All right, any motions?
That was done in the regular meeting. So this is it.
All right, announcements. Any announcements, members? Any announcements?
The Olympic Games at our sister city of Vancouver. Let's wish our Canadians great, and the Americans and all athletes great success.
Mr. Parks.
Advise the public at 3 o'clock we'll be reopening the Martin Luther King basketball and tennis courts. They were displaced by the building of a library, so if anybody in the community is interested, we certainly like to see them out at 3 o'clock.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Alarcon, Huizar, Koretz, Krikorian, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Smith, Zine, Garcetti.
All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.